Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the 80th episode of the Yorkshire Gamers Elite Big War Games podcast. And today, my guest is a local chap, Mr. John Savage, lives just outside Harrogate, in the posh bit of Yorkshire. And I'm going to talk to John about many things, and the main topic being participation games that he runs. Absolutely superb, look great, play great, everyone enjoys themselves, and are what we should all be aiming for when we do something at a show. Bit of sad news before I start. George Gush, the news came to me just before I finished the last episode. The legendary, quite comfortable to say that word, part of wargaming. Renaissance man would be a word for it. George Gush's Renaissance armies, both the green copy and the orange copy. I'm sure many of you listening to this episode will have had or have currently copies of those books, and they were absolutely seminal in those early Italian Wars games for me. And he also produced a set of rules for the Renaissance for WRG, and they were proper old school stuff with your different types of bows and different types of armor. And oh, it was a dream. Proper big tables as well. So thank you, George. You were a massive influence on my hobby and a massive influence on many others, and you will be sadly missed. For many years now, I've been using a company called Podcastle to record my podcasts, and signed up for them for a year in June with unlimited audio recording, and then last month they changed it to a maximum of 2 hours recording a month, which is as much use as a chocolate fireguard at the end of the day. Did it mid contract, so I'm stuffed. So really, really disappointed in Podcastle. If you're setting up a podcast, do not use Podcastle. Their answer to me was that it's in the terms and conditions. They can change the terms as and when they want. But if I wanted to pay them some more money, then I could have the old conditions back. To which I replied, but then you could change the terms and conditions again. And anyway, Podcastle, I think is a scam. I've told them so. And luckily for me, the Zencaster, who I used before, have now got another free unlimited audio recording plan, which I've gone with. And let's just see where it is. But the reason I'm going through all this is that you may notice a change in audio quality, style, etc., halfway through the podcast. So parts one and two are recorded on Podcastle. Don't use them, scammers. And part three and four is recorded on Zencaster, which had a slightly lower gain, so I've had to play around with it, and the levels change around a little bit. So apologies for that. So today's episode, as I said at the start, is with John Savage. John, if you don't know him, posts quite a lot, or used to, on Twitter, but he's mostly on Blue Sky now, and we'll talk about his account during the course of the interview. But he's a great painter, really enthusiastic about his hobby. If you're near any of the tables that he's running at a war game show or a Lardy's day, you can hear the enthusiasm oozing off his table, which is fantastic to see, and the sort of person that I really enjoy engaging with about our hobby. And he's just gone into a bit of big gaming as well, which is excellent and forms a nice little part of the interview in the second section. And at the end of the show, you will all know what a full Leipzig is. So, without further ado, here's the interview. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the interview section of the Yorkshire Gamers Elite Big War Games podcast. And after a journey to the other side of the world, we return to God's Own for today's show. My guest is a well-known face on the Lardy Day scene and has a reputation for producing fantastic-looking participation games that are both fun to play and also great to look at. He's the organiser of Ebor Lard, one of the many similar days around the world where like-minded gamers get together to drink beer and eat curry. Oh yeah, and play some war games as well. When not organising these games, my guest has been involved in developing a number of sets of rules into different areas, most notably in recent years with What a Cowboy, as well as showing off a bit of cock in the jungles of Vietnam. An excellent painter, he has been recently been spotted outside of his comfort zone in some proper big Napoleonic games. So let's get down to the chat and see how my guest has been converted to the one true faith and how it's affected his storage issues at home. So, as always, let's give a really big Yorkshire welcome to my guest for today. It's Mr. John Savage. Hello, John.
Hi, Ken. Thank you for that very kind introduction.
No worries, mate. Now we've known each other for a while, bumping into each other at things like Lardy days and what have you. So it's great to see you. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
You're speaking to us from Savage HQ, live in Yorkshire.
That's right. Yes. As you said, God's own county. Yeah, deepest, darkest Yorkshire, North Yorkshire though. So that's
Oh
the
yeah,
fun
yeah.
bit.
The best bit where I've worked all my career. So
Absolutely,
I do
absolutely.
love that area of the world. So John, just to get you uncomfortable at the start, we do our 4 minute challenge, and that's just basically an opportunity for you to tell us your wargaming history in 4 minutes, and either completely destroy it and get nowhere. Some people like get to 1983 and they're still going, and then others summarise way too much and finish after a minute. But let's see how you get on, mate. There'll be plenty of time to talk about all of it later on. But I'm just going to press the stopwatch and go for it if you're all right with that.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's see where we get to. I've not timed this, so it's all a little bit finger in the air. But so I guess it all. I'm of a certain age, what you might call the Airfix generation. So I got into gaming through Airfix. I like a lot of people of sort of our era, I think you'd say.
Yep.
Used to go down the local toy shop or use agents and get a pack of the little pack of the 1/72nd Airfix figures, and I think one of my earliest memories is probably the US Marine pack. If anybody remembers, had a little rubber assault boat in it, and I remember laying those all out on the living room floor and sort of not certainly not rolling dice, but just playing with them as you do. And I've always been interested in military stuff. No idea where it comes from at all, but grew up with Airfix and really started, I guess, modelling. So I buy the Airfix kits and glue them together. And I remember one time I think it was the first thing I ever painted was a Tamiya dinosaur, Tyrannosaurus Rex. I remember my grandfather bought it for me, bless, and I got a pot of it must have been Humberol or Airfix flesh and slapped that on this dinosaur about that big, and that's the first memory of me ever putting paint on a plastic model, and that developed and went on, and I did that, and then I think it must have been about 11. In what used to be a fantastic model shop in York. It's not there anymore, like most of these places. But in there, they had I found one of the old Airfix magazine guides, World War Two
Oh,
Wargaming by
legendary.
Bruce Quarry. Absolutely, little green book, black and white and all that. But that was just sort of like, right, okay, you can actually do something with rather than just painting models and putting them on a shelf. You can actually do something with them, and that was my first memory of sort of proper being introduced to proper wargaming, and sort of went off. And I can't remember what I did or do much. I think then migrated into 6 mil or micro tanks as they were, heroics and Ross and stuff like that, and started building, painted these, and then I think I was about 15 or 16. Some guys locally in Harrogate set up the Harrogate War Games Club, and I found out about it, and I went down, and I've sort of been seeing those guys on and off for the last however many decades it was. So that sort of got me first properly into wargaming, and then used to play things like laser burn, sort of sci-fi skirmish game. Got into medieval skirmish game with retinue rules and Essex figures. I always remember spending a week potato picking in the October half term just to buy enough money so that I could go to Northern Military and buy some Essex figures. So it's just, and I've still got some of those. I've still got those figures painted. When I was 16 or whatever it was. But so that was it. And then I guess there was then a fairly big hiatus again, like a lot of people. I think probably I went to university and got a job, and then went and got a job, and suddenly life had to get serious, and you sort of had to put away your sort of playing with toy soldiers thing, and it sort of disappeared off the radar. It was sort of always there in the background a little bit. I wasn't active at all, but and then I remember, how did I get back into it? I remember going into, I was living in London at the time, went to the Harrow model shop, which is famous. Again, I don't think it's there anymore, and picked up a copy of the War Games, miniature War Games, it must have been then. And in the back, there was an advert for this new company called Guernsey Foundry. And they had this new range of Wild West figures by Mark Coppleston. And they were like, these are brilliant. And I sent off for some and then thought, okay, why not start painting again, and bought some GW paints and started doing that. Then I had literally bumped into an old friend of mine I used to go with at Salute. I used to go to Salute in London. It went to Kensington Down Hall, just sort of, just to have a look, and sort of, as I said, it was sort of War Game was sort of slightly adjacent. I wasn't really involved, and I bumped into him there, and we got together, and we got back into it. Then moved back to Yorkshire, got reconnected with those guys, and been gaming ever since. And that's really where my wargaming journey, I guess.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, John. You were a little bit over there, but I didn't. I didn't. Because my camera's not working, I can't flash the stopwatch up against the screen like I normally do. But look, that's lovely. Thanks very much for that. So you say there's no like military background in your family. Did you have anybody who influenced you at school, maybe about history?
No, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know. And I think my grandfather was in the army, like a lot of people of that generation, and during the Second World War. But he was a motorcycle dispatch rider, but he was an instructor.
Okay.
So I don't think he ever went abroad. I think he was just teaching, Royal Signals, I guess, motorcycle dispatch riders how to ride motorbikes. That was his, and again, it's one of those things I sort of never really talked about it with him, because you sort of didn't at that age, and I sort of regret that. He's bless him, he's long past. Yeah, my dad did national service in the RAF, again, like most people, but one of those things that I don't think he's ever talked about it. So, but there's no, so I genuinely don't know where the sort of the military history stuff has come from. It's just one of those things. It's always been there, ever since knee high to a grasshopper type thing. Always been interested in that. Battle, the comic Battle. Used to get that religiously, and read that. But there's always been that military history. And that led into, as I said, modelling and the wargaming. It's just something that's always been there, but no idea where it came from. Really weird.
Did you follow it academically? Did you do history at school?
I did history at school. I actually did. Again, it's one of those things. If you had the time again, I might take a slightly different path. But no, I didn't even do history at A level. I did geography. So I've always had a love of maps and things like that, which again I guess probably touches on the military history and stuff like that. So I ended up doing a geography degree. So that was sort of rather than history. But history has always been something I've enjoyed rather than something I have done academically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's good. And just picking a couple of bits out of the 4+ minutes.
Sorry.
One of them is one of the classics for me. Is that green World War II Bruce Quarry book. I've got a lot of fond memories of that book. In fact, I repurchased it a couple of 3 years ago, and one of my retirement goals is to try and replay a game using those rules. And I think it might be a little bit difficult. But did those rules in that book, did they put you off wargaming, or have they shaped how you game at all?
I don't know. I don't think so. And you know what? I don't remember ever actually playing a game using those rules.
Okay.
I think it was just something that suddenly, introduced me to the idea of wargaming, and and then sort of went sideways slightly. And certainly one of the things I do remember is when we were sort of when I joined the Harrogate Club, playing 6mm micro tanks. They played, one of the guys there they played 6mm micro tanks with the most complicated set of rules that is designed for a skirmish game, was clearly not designed to do 6mm big tank battles. So you had angles of armor penetration tables and angles and all this, completely inappropriate for doing 6mm. And I think that probably has had this thing, which is, have the right tools for the right job, use the right set of rules for what you're trying to do. Don't try and do a big game with a skirmish set of rules, or the other way around, because it just doesn't work. So I think that, horrible memories of those sort of games and those sort of rules. And I guess, again, coming through the sort of, 1970s, there was that big thing about, wargaming rules had to be really complicated, because it was a serious hobby. It wasn't just playing with solid swords, it was a serious hobby. And therefore, armor penetration tables down to the last millimeter and angles of fire and this, that, and the other, were important, and they're clearly absolute tosh. And I think things like stumbling across rapid fire. I've just picked up the rapid fire reloaded, which is their sort of.
Yeah.
But got a lot of things wrong with that rules. They can pick holes in it, but it was suddenly a case of here's a set of rules written to play reasonably big games with relatively simple mechanics. But because it was less about the mechanics of what you do and more about the outcome. And I think that sort of approach to rules is rules writing, and there's something that I followed, which is it's about the outcome rather than the mechanics of exactly what you're doing. It's really funny because I mentioned playing Laserbird, which I loved, and I've got massive nostalgia for that game.
Yeah.
And like a lot of these, I've still got my set. I dug them out a few years ago. I thought they were really good. Why don't we have got lots of sci-fi skirmish figures. Why don't we have a game of Laserbird? That'd be fantastic. And I got them off the shelf and I started reading them. And after about 10 minutes, I just went, oh my God, and just put them back on the shelf. Because they were just, the stories in my head of the games we played actually had no connection with it. The rules are so complicated, and there's so much maths involved and all the rest of that sort of stuff. Obviously I was far cleverer when I was 16 and I could cope with this sort of stuff. Definitely I think the modern trend for simple but not simplistic rules, I think, is a really, really positive thing for the hobby. So
Yeah, I mean, I as I've said on the show many times, I do love a good penetration table. I'm still, being an engineer and working, with figures and stuff at work every day, it's not for much longer. Hey,
well, absolutely.
I kind of that's kind of my world, so that's kind of where I go for. But some of those early sets, and I was going to bring up Laserburn for its complexity, but in general, those early war games rules that were usually A5, usually really badly printed, stapled in the middle. They were difficult to get through, for sure. Do you find, I certainly do, as you get older, it's harder to get into a newer set of rules? Just the sheer thought of sitting down and
Yes.
reading through a set of rules and getting into them.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And I've always had a bit of amongst our group, a bit of a reputation of being what somebody describes as a rules tart. I obsessively buy rules, and you know, whether I'm looking for that perfect game, I'm not quite sure. I like looking at rules and getting different ideas, and often very keen to go, oh, let's try something new. And I think, that got to the stage where people were just fed up of me turning up every week with a new set of rules. Go, let's play this. And I still like the idea of that. But you're absolutely right. I am finding it much more difficult to sit down with a set of rules and read them. So yeah, I think I'm being a little bit more sensible now in terms of. I still pick sets of rules up. As I said, I picked up this Rapid Fire Reloaded recently, just a bit of a nostalgia trip. But that's a really, really small, really quite simple set of rules. But yes, I absolutely get that. I think there's definitely. I do find it more and more difficult to get my head around new sets of rules.
I
a good reason to do it.
I find now that by playing a set of rules with somebody who knows them, and we'll talk a bit more about this towards the end of the show about participation games and how that works. But is that something that you find? If you play a game with somebody who knows them, it's so much easier than trying to decipher a set of rules straight from the rule book.
But very much so. I think, I think the only problem I've had is I've tended to be the ones that know the rules and been playing with other people. But that's exactly it. I remember when we started doing, myself and a friend of mine, Gavin, we started doing some of the sharp practice. We took sharp practice to a couple of the shows as participation games. And at that time, I think it hadn't been out particularly long. It was Sharp Practice 2, but it was amazing. We had lots of people say, I got these rules, I couldn't understand them, and I put them down. And actually, we were in that nice position then of being able to because we had a game there of get people, so we'll just have a go, and we'll sort of walk you through it. And it was so often, and it was quite nice, you'd suddenly see this light bulb moment and suddenly go, I get it now, and everything falls into place. Yeah. But that you almost, and I think, that's one of the things often, less so now but some of the things like Sharp Practice, where, because some of the concepts are quite different, quite innovative, and if you've not got a background of those sort of rules and how those work, it can sometimes be quite difficult to understand how it fits together. But the concepts actually in play are really simple. So once you've got somebody show you, as you said, just like, right, I get it. So that was, I really enjoyed just doing that, and rules that we really enjoyed, and just pushing there and say, look, and people going, right, I get it, and going off and enjoying them, which is really good. But I think definitely the best way is learning to play. And I think things like now with YouTube videos and stuff like that, it's a lot easier for rules writers actually to be able to do that and walk somebody through how something will play on the table. And again, I think the Lardys have been very good at doing that with their rule sets, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, well, you just brought up my next point, actually, which was social media. And is that something that you've avoided? I don't think you have a YouTube channel, do you?
No, because I'm technically incompetent. So the thought of doing
I love a bit of honesty on this
YouTube. Yeah, so no, it's not something I've done. I quite enjoy. I enjoy. Watching YouTube videos of people, of rules that I'm interested in, things like Alex Sutherland's, watch stuff that Alex does, and huge kudos to what he does. But it's the time involved in doing things like even something like often thought about a podcast would be quite good, like talking about toy soldiers and gaming and all that sort of stuff. But again, it's just that sort of it's a huge amount of time. You'll know this far better than I do, and in terms of it almost becomes a hobby in its own right. And so no, it's not something I've done. I post a bit on very little X now, but on Twitter as it was. I mean, at one point, Twitter was really good. several
It
years ago.
was.
The wargaming little part of it was very nice. It's gone up. I do a bit on Blue Sky now. Just post some stuff. It's quite nice. I like the fact that you can paint a unit up and take some photographs and
Hmm.
share it with people. That's quite nice. So I think there's a lot of positives in that social media and things like WhatsApp and the ability to have groups of people and I guess again sort of things like virtual Lard that Jeremy organised and during COVID to being able to run virtual games with people effectively all over the world. I mean, I remember we did quite a lot of the play testing for What a Cowboy virtually. So I would set up the table at home, have the cameras set up, and then players would dial in. I think at one point we probably had, we had 7 players on in six or 7 different countries
Wow.
across Europe, which is fantastic
Yeah,
because
brilliant.
you would never be able to do that in any other way. And in some ways, it's not done it for a bit actually because now that we can meet face to face, it's there's less incentive to do it, but doing things like that is definitely using the technology to its best use.
Yeah. So we'll move on now a little bit and talk about some of the periods that you game in. And I don't want to try and sound like a mafia don here, but Savage, stay in your lane. Italian Wars, mate. Where did that come from?
um, Italian war. The trouble is, I again, as well as being a rules tart, I'm the consummate butterfly. Um, I would love to be one of these that just has a period, sticks in that period, builds armies and terrain for that period, and be focused.
Yeah.
And I'm just not. I can't do it. I'll see something. Oh, wow, that's interesting. I'm like the squirrel from over the head. Oh, it's shiny. Oh, shiny. Oh, and I'm terrible at getting distracted. And so I've got small collections, not big, for all sorts of different periods. And to be fair, the Italian Wars, most of the Italian Wars figures I had that did the Midgard game at Midgard Moot they're actually not mine. They're a friend of mine, Gavin's. He put those together. I've got some. I've got some of the Swiss and stuff like that. But one of the early participation games we did at Partisan was using sharp practice for the Italian Wars because it's a period
All
that
right.
Gavin
Yeah.
loved, and actually that it worked surprisingly well. It was. It looked, but it's such a visually stunning period. So it's lovely. So yeah, I'd like to get some more Italian Wars, but a lot of the figures there, I've still got them. Gavin's blessing is that he's got a young family, so he and set up a business a few years ago, which takes all his time, so he does very little gaming now at all. So I've managed to acquire temporarily some of his rather nice Italian Wars figure collection, which I've been using, which is good. So, but other than that, ancients. That's a big, the classic Romans and ancient Britons. That's an area that I love. Going back to Warhammer Ancient Battles, used to love playing Warhammer Ancient Battles. It was that was that period when it had lots of people playing it. Was really good and did a massive amount, I think, to promote 28mm for ancients, which is maybe historically been seen more as a 15mm type of, and maybe suffered a little bit from the sort of competition environment to get sort of Warhammer Ancient Battles back and pushing 28mm Ancients, I think was brilliant. So really love that set of rules. And so it's weird, that's a whole other conversation, isn't it? Why you stop playing sets of rules because they're not published anymore, and it's suddenly like, oh, I can't play Ancient Battles because it's not the current set of rules, which of course is nonsense.
Those rules were so well supported, and some of the campaign books, the Alexander one, the Byzantium one, um, I think it's Beyond the Golden Gate, the Byzantium one, are still ones that I look back now at for the pictures and also for the information inside them. I think it was a really good, decent set that maybe could have had a bit longer in the
Yeah,
lineup.
I think it's a real shame that it stopped being supported, or Games Workshop, or that they didn't allow it to continue in a different form. They just sort of cut it dead. But you're right; those books are brilliant, and I've still got those, and we'll dip into them, and as much research and things like James Morris's Age of Arthur book, superb. Great, and almost irrespective of what set of rules are used, there's ideas there for games and scenarios and army lists and all that sort of stuff, which is really good.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And something that is I mentioned in the intro, and you've been out and about with, is Vietnam. Is that another butterfly, or is that something that's a real kind of sticker?
It's a bit of a sticker at the moment, but it was very much a butterfly. So Vietnam's odd actually, because we used to play going back, when I first started wargaming. Used to the guys occasionally used to do Vietnam, and I guess this is in the 1980s, so Vietnam wasn't that long ago, and it all felt a little bit too close to me. And I didn't really enjoy it. It wasn't something I was particularly interested in. Although I think I had the horrible thought the other day, which is that we are now as close to Vietnam as we were from the Second World War in the 1980s. That sort of weird thing. So anyway, but yeah, it started because I saw the Empress Miniatures range of Vietnam figures that Paul Hicks had sculpted, and I fell in love with the range of figures. Bought them, started painting them. And it was a case of, oh, right, okay, need something to play, to put on the table with. And again, thought, well, really enjoy Chain of Command. Why won't Chain of Command? Well, let's have a look at using Chain of Command, because effectively it's still, okay, you've got slightly more firepower with automatic weapons. You've got assault rifles coming and all that rest of it. But fundamentally, it's not that different to World War II. You haven't got the technology that you've now got in modern games. So I was convinced that actually I could use a World War II set of rules with some tweaks, and that's what I did. And so that took off, and then sort of started putting some games on, and people seemed to really enjoy it. And then I managed to acquire a set of. I bought some. Gareth Lane was selling some of his Vietnam terrain, so I thought I'll buy that. And then Martin Stambridge, who one of the guys from Mountain Strike Force, who did a fantastic Vietnam Saigon game at Salute a couple of years ago, he unfortunately passed away earlier this year. And through various connections, I was offered his terrain collection, which I snapped up, and so suddenly I find myself actually now with Vietnam being one of the biggest collections I've got, which was never the plan. It was never a case of I'm going to do it, and but it's a fascinating period, and it has some really interesting games on there, definitely.
That brings us nicely on, actually, to the next thing I was going to kind of talk about, which is you developing other sets of rules into different areas. Something you've done with What a Cowboy from What a Tanker, and like we were talking about there, bringing Chain of Command into Vietnam. But you're kind of going a little bit further with it, because it's not just around the table with your mates. What a Cowboy's been released, and it's a real game, if you want to say it that way. So where does that drive come from? Is it something you've always done?
Yeah, I think it is. I am, the eternal tinkerer. I haven't got enough original thought to actually develop a set of rules from scratch, but I'm quite happy to take somebody else's hard work and just bastardize it a little bit. So and it's just I don't. What a Cowboy was was very interesting because it was, I'd played What a Tank, I quite liked it, and I genuinely don't know where the idea came from, but it was I sort of woke up on, well, actually, why not? And I've always liked Wild West, and I've always had a thing about, so going back, as I said, to the sort of so it's always been a period that I've enjoyed, and doing a Wild West gunfight at the table, great fun. And yeah, I just thought, well, actually, why can't use the action dice mechanic effectively for an individual? And it went from there. And it sounds simple, and the concept was simple. We put some stuff on the table, and the first couple of games were bloody awful, but there was still enough going. There's something here, I need to work on it, and that's where it went. And it was 3 years in 3 years in development, and because I put them together, and we probably played them for 6 months, and we got it to the stage where most of the rough edges were knocked off, and it was presentable. And I think I messaged Rich Clark and Two Fat Lardys and just said, "Oh look, I've done this with your set of rules. Are you interested in having a look?" And I was thinking that there's an article here in the Lard magazine, their sort of annual, share it with people. And I was quite surprised when it came back. I went, oh no, I really like the idea. I would like to try and develop it a little bit more. And it was very much, it was never my intention to make it a commercial set of rules or even publish it as such. It was something that I did just because it was fun and we enjoyed doing it. And it was very much with Rich's support and help, but it came out and ended up getting published. But there are several times in that 3 years that it nearly all went in the bin, because there is a big difference between doing a bit of tinkering and knocking something out together for your mates, and actually producing something for that's commercial. And I think that was a hard lesson that Rich taught me. So, but we got there in the end. So I'm very pleased and very proud of it.
Yeah. Is there any plans for Vietnam Cop to be released as a official, or is it just
Rich I had a couple of conversations with Rich, and I think Rich would really like me to do something around that. It's just a case of I need to sit down and put time and effort into doing it, and at the moment I just haven't got the time really to devote to that. And I think because actually the core mechanics, I've tried deliberately to change as little as possible in the core rules. So actually, and one of the things that I did do was I reduced the effectiveness, getting into detail here, but reduced the slight effectiveness of assault rifles, which were probably overpowerful in the original chain of command set rules. It's interesting that in COP 2, what I've done with assault rifles is the way they're presented now. So actually, you can pretty much pick up a set of rules, a chain of command, and use it as written for Vietnam, I think. There's things like the organisation tables, and then scenarios, and then the special rules. But even again, a lot of the special rules that I've used, I've taken and bastardised and tinkered with things that Richard done in the Far East supplement. A lot of the sneaky Japanese tricks that were in that supplement have been rebranded as sneaky VC tricks. So again, I'm not claiming any great insight, but it's amazing how, and I think it's probably a testament to how good chain of command is, that you can use it for not just World War II, but it'll go as far as Vietnam. I've got a little project which is a bit stalled at the moment, but I do want to get back to it, which is doing chain of command Spanish Civil War, taking early period, and there's lots of stuff that other people have done around those sort of early war periods and stuff like that. So yes, that was a really long answer to a short question. Ultimately, yes, I would love to try and put together a chain of command supplement for Vietnam as a PDF or something like that. But when's that going to happen? I don't know. So.
No, we all have these projects lying around that we think one day And unfortunately, I'm at that stage now. If I do retire properly, that I've got no excuses, and all those half-finished projects that are lying around really should be finished, and I can't blame work anymore. So a different kind of
Yeah,
pressure.
absolutely. I think I've got lots of, like most people, I've got lots of sort of half finished or unfinished projects that. But I think that's important. It's like the old adage, isn't it? That you know, never paint your last figure, because once you paint all your figures, that's when you die. So always have your lead
Yeah.
mountain is keeping you alive, because you've still got to keep going. So I'm fully subscribed to that. Having a fairly lead mountain, increasingly more of a plastic mountain these days. But yeah, there we go.
I think if that adage is true, I'm immortal.
Oh, fingers
But
crossed.
yeah. So uh, we'll just move on in this section. I knew this kind of was going to be a longer than normal because there's so much to talk about outside of the other areas, and I just kind of want to do some of the normal stuff that I would do with people, and that's initially just to chat about your home setup. What area, what space have you got dedicated at home to the hobby?
Well, I have just massively stepped my game up. So I literally just, it's 99.5% finished, but I've just managed to, a friend of mine has built me a garden room. So I've now got,
Oh yes,
uh,
another war game shed.
so I've now got a rather nice, I'm sitting here at the moment, war game shed, which means that I've got a permanent 6 foot by 8 foot table with the room to extend it to 12 by 6. So that has just massively, because before that I was in the dining room. I managed to squeeze a 6 by 4 table into the dining room with some chipboard onto the dining room table. And that was my wargaming room, and yeah, it worked. And probably like a lot of people, 6 by 4 was as big as it would go, but yeah, it was fine. But now I'm sitting looking at it. We've got our first the inaugural game this Saturday. I've got some friends coming over, and we're gonna play some Big Battle Napoleonics. So yeah, I'm massively pleased and very lucky to have been able to do it. So yeah, that's definitely up my gaming. Give me a lot more space, which is really nice.
You moved your painted area into the shed as well,
I
or is that still
haven't. No,
inside?
I've got a little room. I've got a box room upstairs, which is my painting room. And to be fair, I built the shed, and I thought I've got loads of space, and I've moved everything out of the dining room and out of the garage into here. And I'm now looking and going, there's not a lot of spare space here. I've filled the bloody thing. And so yeah, I've still got stuff in the garage, and I've still got my painting room. But yeah, so I'm very lucky. I've got a dedicated painting area, which makes life so much easier. That yeah, I can just pop in there, and you can leave stuff lying around, and then just pop in and do a bit of painting when you want. So at the moment, I've got a desk here, which is sort of my work desk as well. I don't know. Maybe if and when I retire, I'll bring everything into the shed, and
Something just fell over.
yeah, that was just some rivet tiles have just fallen off. But anyway, there we go. That's bizarre. But yeah, but no, I'm having a dedicated gaming table and space is just like it's a dream. It's literally a dream come true. So
That is fantastic to hear. And you mentioned earlier on that you were part of the Harrogate Club, and that's been going for a while. I remember the show that they used to run
yes,
in the
Sabre. Was
baths,
it Sabre? Yeah,
Sabre,
that's right. Yes,
yeah, in the Turkish baths for many
yeah,
years,
yeah.
and then down at
Oh, the
the Yorkshire
pavilions, wasn't it?
Showground for a couple,
Yes, that's right.
yeah,
The
for a couple
Yorkshire
of
Showground.
years.
Yeah.
So, how is Harrogate War Games Club? Where do you meet and members, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's still live and kicking. Just I think it's an interesting. There's a small group of us. There's probably only about 8 to 10 of us, and I must admit I'm one of the least regular attendees at the moment, but there's probably about 8 or 10, maybe a dozen maximum guys that go to do tabletop wargaming. They've got quite a strong role play contingent, so I think they've probably got about maybe 20 people that go there to do the role playing, and they meet now. We used to meet at the Rafa Club in Harrogate. That building's now been sold, so we relocated to Church Hall. I can't remember the name of it, which isn't very helpful, is it? But it's just right behind the Odeon in Harrogate. So it's very central. So meet on a Thursday night there. We've got 2 or 3 rooms that they use the role players, and we've got the nice thing is that there's a dedicated room upstairs that we can use, and that's really helpful. So it's got a couple of tables in there, but you can leave some stuff set up, which is got a storage room in there as well. So that they've got a really quite a decent setting there as well. So that's quite nice. But yeah, must admit I've not been as often as I would. As I should do or would like, but it's a good club, and if anybody is local and fancies coming along, then do so. I think that all the Google Harrogate War Games Club, you'll find the details on there. They're a nice bunch of guys, very welcoming, have their little idiosyncrasies, but I'm sure that's wargaming clubs across the country, isn't it? For a strange breed.
Yeah. So. Exactly, and I think same. There's lots of people out there who wargame solo or in little silos, a couple of like with the mate or whatever. And I would always recommend to people to get along to a local club if you've got one, just to expand your horizons and get more people to game with and more opportunity to access people's collections of figures and have a cracking game. So yeah, by all means, pop along to the Harrogate Club. It's not that far away from me, so you never know. Now I've got more time on my hands, I might pop down. That's just down the road from the old police station, so I know
it is. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, so that's all flats now, I think.
It is, I know. It's quite sad.
Which is a bit weird. I could tell you some stories about what went on in there. You definitely wouldn't buy a flat, right?
No,
surprised it's not haunted. So just before we finish this bit off, because we're not going to talk about it anywhere else really, I just wanted to have a quick chat with you about painting. Because I really enjoy your painting style, and you do churn out a few figures now and then. So is that a big part? We're going to do the Venn diagram in a minute, but is the painting side a big part of the hobby for you?
Yeah, it is. It is. And the risk of touching on the Venn diagram too much, I always used to think I was a painter before I was a gamer. What I found recently, in fact, is that actually I paint because I want to game. So if I've got a game, I want to do a game, or I've got a game lined up, that gives me the incentive to get stuff painted, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, while painting's super important, it is now increasingly it's about painting for a game, which rather than just painting for painting's sake. But yeah, I think I've always been a painter. It's where I think going right back is where I started, which is sort of modelling rather than wargaming. So I've not come to wargaming and then gone, okay, right, and I need to paint. And it's something I enjoy doing. I get pleasure out of doing it, and I'm always looking for new ideas and new techniques. I quite happily watch, read stuff on painting and try and look at what people do and get different ideas. And I guess, my style, it's interesting people talk about it because you don't necessarily think you've got a style, but clearly you have. It's one of those things that's sort of developed over time. Ultimately, I guess, things like Kevin Dallimore and, the 3 colour system. I remember, years ago now, but, reading an article about black undercoat and changing. I always used to, like most people used to paint, use white undercoat and then changing to a black undercoat, and it was like this game. It's like, oh my god, this is a game changer. And yeah, I've never looked back since then. But yeah, painting is really important. I enjoy painting.
So, if you could describe your style, are you a wet blender, or are you like a Dallimore style with the shades, layers of shade?
Yeah, and again, it sort of depends on what I'm doing, and also depends. I've changed recently, and I'll explain why. But fundamentally, yeah, it's that sort of black undercoat, base shadow, mid coat, highlight is my
Yeah.
approach. Um, I do use a wet palette. Um,
Ooh.
I know, but I find it. I just don't. I find it quite. I find it quite, but not for wet blending or any of that sort of fancy stuff, because that just all takes time. Yeah, if you and this is this is there's a difference between painting for wargaming and painting for painting or painting for display. Because the people,
Yeah.
things like Golden Demon and stuff like that. Even some things like the painting competition at Hammerhead. It's a different hobby. It is
Yeah.
it's a completely different hobby to painting wargaming figures for display as to playing wargaming figures to put on the table. And I still spend too much time painting. We have this. One of the things we've been doing with the is actually, when you're playing a game and you're 3 foot away from it, you can't see what you spent ages putting. You can't see, and especially if if you've got consistent basing, because it's bases that you see. Or is it bases, faces, and shields are supposed to be the 2 or 3 if you concentrate
Yeah.
on those. And that's where I think doing some of the Napoleonic stuff, where you have now got to churn out 24, and I'm doing 24 unit figure battalions, which aren't particularly big, but it's enough. I've been trying to make up some little tips and do stuff. So one of my friends, Matt Slade, who is a professional painter and can turn pretty good stuff out incredibly quickly, who is the absolute epitome of your just fucking paint it approach, Ken, because he just does it, and it's like, oh yeah, here's another army I produced in a week. How have you done that? So I'm trying to take some of his ideas to things like paint. So I'm doing Napoleonics now, undercoat them black, and then give them a grey dry brush, and all of a sudden everything that's black, shakos, black belts, cartridge boxes, boots, they're done, they're finished. There's no point. I used to, and then you go on. So doing little tricks like that, where you're suddenly going, I've done a load of stuff, and that takes no time at all. And then you can spend a bit of time on the other bits and pieces that actually need painting. So I'm definitely trying to be a little bit more impressionistic, a little bit less obsessive about getting absolutely everything right. But I still do spend a bit of time on things like faces, because those are the things I think when you look at figures close up, if you've got decent faces, flesh, it brings a figure alive. Even though actually, most of the time when you're playing with them on a war game table, you can't see that sort of detail. So there's a balance to be had between doing something. But again, I was thinking about this the other day. I think probably before this, and that the thing. I think there's a lot of the photography. You open any War Games magazine or online stuff, and you see beautifully painted figures and all the rest of it. But actually, you don't. Those figures. You don't need to paint to that standard to put them on the table. And I'm trying to wean myself off that sort of super detailed way of painting stuff to something that's a little bit more utilitarian, if that makes sense. But I'm a good choice of colour, strong highlights, things that will catch the eye on the table. I think are really important, and some of the little details that you might not see. Just trying to get rid of those.
Yeah, I think for me, color choice and color placement is probably the key to my style, and I don't think we're that different in the way that our stuff looks.
No.
And I think you do that. You do that as well. In that a blob of a certain color in a certain place can bring a figure to life,
Oh,
whereas you could get the same effect spending 3 hours wet blending 16 different layers.
Absolutely, yeah. Increasingly, I've really done some figures I've been painting recently where final really quite bright flesh highlight, which looks too stark when you first do it, but suddenly there's this, I don't know, there's some magic that happens, and once you've finished it, and then you just go, oh yeah, no, that just those little dots of light make all the difference, and strong highlights. You often, if you're painting something super realistic, on the table it doesn't have enough color to pop. You do need to sort of accentuate stuff. It's a little bit like the stage makeup, isn't it? If you stage makeup, if you looked at somebody with stage makeup on like we're looking now, would look horrendous, look completely artificial. But under the lights of the stage, and when you're sort of 20 yards away, and it's exactly the same thing but in miniature.
Yeah, it's a different way of looking at a painting. You're painting for a specific purpose
Yeah.
and a specific way of looking at something. And I'm just looking over at some stuff I've just finished recently, and I do photograph mine really closely, which is probably my own fault that I have to make sure everything's dotted and I's. But it's the overall look, I think, of a unit, isn't it, John, that
It is.
draws your eye in.
Yeah, absolutely. And things
Yeah.
like, I used to paint eyes and I've not painted eyes on a figure for the last 10 years. And, because actually, you can't see the whites of people's eyes. I'm looking at my picture here on the camera, and all I can see is a dark area where my eyes are, which is a bit of shadow. And you leave that in there. There's things that we assume that we should paint on figures, and actually a lot of time is you don't need to. So you're right. Deciding what you want, painting, but just get some paint on. Being having a system and sticking with it, and good colour choice does make a difference.
Do you find you have a lot of time to paint, or is it fitted in here and there?
It's fitted in. Sorry, I was going to say it's fitted in here and there. Really, I tend to find that what I'm not very good at is being consistent, which I know everybody says consistency is key, and it absolutely is, because if you can do an hour a day or an hour an evening or whatever it is, then it's that racks up over time. I tend to find I'm a bit sort of, I'll have a burst, and often driven by wanting to do something. So I'm putting a game on, and therefore, right, I need to get this stuff done for a game. So I'll have a burst of activity, and then I might get that done, and then I might have a couple of weeks where actually I don't touch a paintbrush, which is a bit difficult, because it's almost I come back to the painting sometimes. It's almost like I've got to relearn. Well, I've forgotten how to do it, if that makes sense. Just, okay. But yeah, I again, one of the benefits of having a dedicated painting table is that you can just drop in and just go, I've got half an hour, right, I'll just go and stick a bit of paint on those, or put some, do some figures together, or whatever it is. I would like to spend more time painting, but it's like everything. It's trying to get a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, oh, definitely. And just for listeners, if you haven't seen any of John's stuff, then pop onto Blue Sky. You still on X, John?
Yes, I'm still there. I've not posted anything on X, but there'll be, there will be the account's still there. There'll be historic stuff that I've painted on there. Definitely, I post now pretty much reasonably regularly. If I painted stuff, I'll put it on Blue Sky. So yeah, people will find stuff that I painted. Again, probably too close up of stuff, but yeah, give people an idea of what to do. And I'm a big fan of painting, and I think I've been painting for more years than I care to remember. It's like a lot of these things. It's painting's not difficult. It's definitely a skill, but it's about practice. And the best way of getting better at painting is do more painting. Simple as that.
Yeah. If you what do they say? If you do 10,000 hours of anything, you'll be an expert at it. So I must be a super duper expert. So it's at John Savage, all one word, .bsky.social if you're looking for John on Blue Sky, and it's well worth it. There's some great stuff on there. Just before we do the Venn diagram, I just wanted to talk about other hobbies, because you are a keen cyclist. If you follow you on social media, and there's a picture behind you. It looks like you're going downhill, which to me is always the best bit of cycling.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yes. Yes.
what I wanted to kind of bring up is a lot of people um, say that wargaming is an expensive hobby, and but as I know you've got two hobbies, is how does it compare to cycling, for example?
That's
Because
a,
I've said it before. I've got a friend who lives in Skipton who's a big cyclist, and he once spent 4 grand on two wheels, and they didn't even have the rubber bit on them. So, so uh, how do they compare in terms of cost?
I think, yeah, I think like a lot of these things, I think actually cycling is probably more expensive than wargaming.
Hmm.
Wargaming is probably not actually, we spend a lot of money and we do, but yeah, no, in terms of, bikes and bikes plural, and yeah, I've not spent 4 grand on a set of wheels, but maybe half of that or something like. But yeah, so and it's you can spend an awful lot of money on cycling kit and cycling gear, probably more than wargaming. So in many ways, yeah, a lot of these. It's not a big tick for the amount of time, the enjoyment to get out of it. Actually, it's pretty cost efficient. I think, to be fair.
A friend of mine has just retired, and he's just spent 15 grand on one of these electric super mega off-road bikes.
Right.
With it, and my immediate thing was as a massive petrol head. It's like, fuck me, you get a decent car for that.
Well, I know it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I know certainly that my good bike. You could certainly get a decent small family hatchback for what you buy that new. And the daft thing, because motorbikes, you get a really good motorbike for 12, 15 grand, and that's the price of a top end road bike, a push bike these days, which is crazy. But it is what it is. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things. I enjoy it. Keeps me fit. Keeps me reasonably out of trouble. Yeah, it is interesting. I tend to have, and quite separate sort of hobbies. They don't get a great deal of crossover, which is quite interesting. But there we go.
Yeah, no, I was just interested in the cost side of things because I know many people say wargaming is expensive, and certainly with the advent of plastic figures, it's become a lot more accessible to a lot more people in recent years. I spent 70 quid on three, four, maybe four battalions of plastics, and then I spent over 120 quid on 24 gendarmes. So it's you can, if you buy wisely, this hobby can be quite economical
I
for certain.
I think so. I think it's never been as accessible and as easy to get into, and really honestly as affordable as it is now. And like anything, you can spend lots of money, and let's face it. I mean, yeah, you've only got to go into a Games Workshop store, have a look at the prices, and then go and have a look online at historical stuff, and you suddenly go, this historical hobby is actually really good value. So yeah.
It is very good value. So we'll just finish off, mate, the introduction with our Venn diagram of wargaming, something that's been going since show one, and that's just describing yourself really. And we've got it. We've just kind of dipped around the edges of it throughout the introduction, and that's describing yourself in the various sections in the Venn diagram, which are painter, collector, historian, and wargamer, and how you see yourself and those sections fitting together for your hobby?
Good question. I think I'm probably reasonably well balanced across all four, because at the end of the day, I'm a wargamer because that's what that drives everything else. If I don't, if I wasn't wargaming, might still be painting and doing those other bits and pieces, but actually it's the wargaming that drives those other bits and pieces. So the fact that, the historical, the research, that stuff, that's coming out of the fact because I want to do a game, or I'm tinkering with a set of rules. I want to know more about that period. So therefore that drives the sort of desire to do that research and the history. And I enjoy that part of what we do in that part of the hobby. But it's driven by the wargaming. And the same as I said, I touched on before with painters. I'd always said I was a painter before a gamer, but I'm not sure that's entirely correct. I paint because I want to game with it. I'm not sure I would be painting just to put stuff in a display cabinet. And certainly, where I am at the moment is the stuff that excites me and gets stuff on the painting table is because I want to put it on a game. I want to use it and field it. So that's the history. That's the history of the painting. What were the other two? I can't remember. There's obviously the war game, which I touched on, the collecting bit. And collecting is yeah. I'm sat here looking down at rows of shelves of boxes of figures and sets of rules on shelves and board games. And board games interesting because I've got a reasonably decent collection of board games. Many of them have never been played.
Right, yeah.
I've always bought them because that looks interesting. I'm definitely going to play that, and then just never quite got round to it, or it's. But so I think I'm probably a bit of a there's definitely a collecting gene, and I think we all that probably many of us suffer from that. We buy stuff because it's nice to own it, and rule sets. I definitely collect rule sets. I've got lots of rules on the shelf that I'm looking at here that I've not played and that are unlikely to play, but I've bought them because I was interested in have a read of them, dip into them. So there's definitely a fairly strong collecting gene as well. Would I buy? But equally, that comes back to the gaming bit, and I think that's the beauty of the hobby, isn't it? That it's got these different aspects that feed different desires. That collection, the creative, the painting stuff, the history, it all feeds in, but ultimately it comes back to actually putting something on the table. I think the one thing in terms of gaming, I'm probably as happy, if not more happy, designing and putting on a game for other people and organising games, not necessarily playing. I'm more than happy to set a game up and run a game and umpire a game or facilitate a game as I am playing. So that's the one thing that I enjoy playing a game, but actually just as I said, probably bringing all those items, all those things together, which is coming up with the idea, painting some figures, collecting or buying those figures, terrain, and putting and designing a scenario in a game and putting it on the table for then people to come along and enjoy that. There's something about that I really enjoy.
Yeah, it's a different element of the hobby. And it's always great when a group has a person who is like that. And thankfully most groups do. The organizer, the doer, the ones that puts the figures on the table for everyone to sit round and have a go at. So that's wonderful to hear, and it's also a cracking Venn diagram, mate. Thank you very much for that.
Pleasure.
So we shall finish section one and a short break for our audience, and then we'll be back with our big game chat. Part two of the show. We haven't done this for a while, but I'm going to put John on the spot here, really, because it's the big game chat. And social media is a wonderful thing in that you can't hide anything that you're doing when you post it on there. And John is well known for his more skirmish style gaming, and we're going to talk about participation games and stuff later on the show. But recently, he has been seen around a large table with a large number of figures, and I thought that it would be a good opportunity to have a little bit of a chat about that. So, what confessions have you got to make to the high priest of the big game?
well, I have to confess that I am a convert.
Good man. Good man.
And I was thinking about this before it came on, and I think when you first came out with the big game is dead, blah blah blah, and I think I was, no, he's talking nonsense. But actually, I do think there is definitely some truth in what you're saying. I think the big game has always been part of the hobby, and I remember going back and I was there again. It got me thinking. We used to do quite a few big games. And I remember going right back to those. Again, showing my age, but the first few copies, first few editions of miniature war games when it first came out, which had some fantastic articles, and in each of those it was a big game. It was a big game based on Arnhem, based rather than based on Arnhem. There was a big ancient, and we did that 20 years ago. We had a hired the village hall and put a big 20 mil as it was, because that was the scale. The scale in those days, big 20 mil game on. When we were playing Warhammer Ancient Battles, one of the things I really loved about Warhammer Ancient Battles was it was one of the few times everybody in our group got invested in it and bought armies and painted armies, and we had this a huge game with different board, completely not entirely ahistorical, but that was great, and it had that sort of has gone away, and I think there's been a commercial drive for not necessarily big small games, but I think comes back to as we were saying before. I had a reasonably sized dining room where I could fit a 6x4 table in, but no bigger than that. And actually, a lot of people don't even have a 6x4 table. So, if you're commercially looking to sell to more people, naturally you're going, we're going to do a small game. And that means you've either got to shrink the figures down and go down to 6 mil, or God forbid, Backhouse is 2 mil. And or you've got to have smaller games and skirmish games and things like that. And again, I think that touching what we're doing about painting, I think there's a lot of there's some interesting small scale, but where half of the thing is painting half a dozen figures beautifully. That I've never really quite been into that, but I think in some ways I don't think the big game is dead, but I do think it has probably been less at the less in the eye, and I think that's probably becomes because the magazines tend to focus on what's commercially successful or commercially of interest, and those have tended to be small games. But I've always been it sort of got me back into thinking about doing some big games. And again, we did 2015, so the anniversary of Waterloo, which is frighteningly 10 years ago. I came up with the idea in the beginning of that year, wouldn't it be great to refight Waterloo? And at that time, nobody had any Napoleonic figures. So it was okay. So I came up with a plan and bathtubed it down, as the old phrase is. So effectively, a battalion on the table represented a brigade in real life. And we put, and again, it was one of the few times in our group that have managed to get quite a few people pulling in the same direction, people committed to painting stuff and all the rest of it, and we didn't quite get where we wanted to, but we had enough figures, and we put on a game of Waterloo. And it was only sort of last year when I was thinking about that. Wouldn't it be good to do that again? And again, it was a case of, well, let's have a go. And actually, if you get enough, I say enough people, if you get a small group and everybody goes, yes, we'll join it. Actually, you can then put on a big game without a massive investment. If everybody puts in Napoleonic, everybody puts a brigade together, so 3 or 4 battalions and a cannon and maybe a bit of cavalry, which is not a massive force. And often people have got these big, they've got something similar, they've done sharp practice or something like that, which is, then you suddenly go, well, if you bring all those together and put them all together, suddenly you've got a big game. So it sort of took off. So we managed to get a couple of big games, and again we did I think highlight for this year was our Waterloo weekend, where we fought. We did a refight of Quatre Bras, Waterloo, and Ligny, and there was probably about a dozen of us got together. Everybody, joined in, painted some stuff up. We had benefit of some people who, massively over delivered. So, Matt Slade with his monster painting that he did, but Theo, a friend of mine who scours eBay and buys up stuff, and has now got a really quite sizable Napoleonic collection that he's managed to acquire for not that vast amounts of money. And
cheaper than a set of bike wheels.
Well, definitely, absolutely. and some of it's not massively well painted, but it comes back to the fact, actually, when you put them on the table, and the real key is actually at the end of the game, where you have to sort everybody's figures out. You're physically having to pick things up and go, oh, is that one of Theo? Is that one of mine? And when you look at them like that, with an inch, 6 inches from you, you can tell. But on the table, you can't tell. That's a big, and there is something about a big game where you're not just moving a section of troops or even a platoon, but you're sending a whole cavalry division into action.
Yeah.
And there is something about that, and maybe it's the megalomaniac in me, but when you're going, release the heavy cavalry, and you've got a whole cavalry division. And I remember it was fantastic. I've got a photograph of the Battle of Ligny because we did a big L-shaped table.
Yeah.
We were really lucky. We got the club here, and they got a snooker table and a pool table. We had a 16-foot table for Waterloo, which is great. And then we ended up putting another pool table alongside it so we had this L-shaped table for Ligny. And there's a photograph I've got which harks back almost to some photographs I've seen in the 1960s, where we've got this table full of terrain, loads of figures on it, and one of the guys is kneeling on the table to reach into the middle to move some figures.
That is a proper game.
Proper big game, and you have to kneel on the. I probably could have walked around the table, but everybody's so vested. It's like, no, I've got to move these guys. Then he's kneeling on the table to move these cavalry against the Prussians, and I looked at that moment and went, "That's it. That's a big game." And since then, I've been I'm absolutely hooked. And so, it's good. So I'm now trying to up my painting and paint more stuff and rather than putting together, trying to put brigades together and all the rest of it. But if you get half a dozen like-minded people who are prepared to put a bit of time, buy a few boxes of plastics or do a bit of judicious buying off eBay, it's not as difficult as people think.
I think that's a really important point, John, because the war games industry today is clearly being driven off the back of people who are familiar with Warhammer and that style of game, where it's 1 versus 1, and you invest a certain amount in an army that you will fight against an opponent. And although it does happen, you don't often see a big Warhammer 40k game with 10 players aside, etc. So it's a lack of knowledge, I think, about exactly what you just explained there. That ability of a group of people to get together and invest probably the same amount that they would in a 40k army for an historical army, and you all get together, and there's a joy, I think, in working as a group on a project.
Absolutely, yeah. We had Waterloo was a fantastic weekend, and we've got plans next year. Borodino is our flagship game, I think. So we're sort of working together, and we're starting to pull together more Russians, and we'll do, again. My plan is to try and do a weekend with Borodino as the main event, but some of the earlier battles and some of the Prussians and Austrians were involved in that 1812 campaign, and then ultimately my big plan is to do Leipzig.
Yeah.
But the whole thing, I've got, there's some fantastic games, even some big games. One going to play this Saturday, which is one of the engagements as part of Leipzig. But I want to go back and try and do that. Might not be as grand, but the old Peter Gilder, where he did the whole of Leipzig, and effectively the big square table, but with the hole in the middle, which is the town of Leipzig, and that's my sort of aim. Now, whether we'll get there or not, I don't know, but I think there's some really good stuff if you dig back through some of the old wargaming, the original miniature war games. And I think there was an article that Peter Gilder did on this Battle of Leipzig in sort of issue 5 and 6, I think it's. I've got to look it up on miniature war games. But the fact that you can go online now with miniature war games, and for not a huge amount of money, you can access every single pretty much every copy of those old magazines. I think is really interesting. So, but I think the big game back in had a bit more profile, and I think it's not the magazine's fault, because at the end of the day, the magazines can only print what people will write about, and if people aren't writing about and doing articles for big games, then they can't publish it. So, but I think it is nice to see a little bit more people talking about big games, and as you say, it's not as difficult as you might think it is.
Yeah, I think some people put up unnecessary barriers, and that's what the show has been about since I started. It's been about trying to make people realise that it isn't that hard, and you don't need £1 million. And yes, there are people like yourself now. You've joined the dedicated wargame space club, but there are. God, is it falling apart, John? There's another bit dropped off.
It is, yeah. One of the lights has just fallen down. It's just slowly collapsing around me, but hopefully we'll get through.
I know a bit further north of you, Ripon's well known for sinkholes. Your garden hasn't disappeared, has it?
No, not yet. No, we're still okay. I think we're still okay.
It was one of the crowning moments of my career when I attended a sinkhole in Ripon, and I was able to say that we found a hole and we're looking into it. That was
very good. Very good.
That was I'd waited all my career for that, and I was so proud to get it in. That was very good indeed. So it sounds like you've got the addiction, John. That it's so I started off with a bit of puff, and then I've ended up moving on to the blow, and now I'm injecting. And you've kind of gone from a little bit of Waterloo to thinking about Leipzig.
Yes, it is. It is a little bit like that. But there is. I'm those big Napoleonic games are. They don't have to be Napoleonic games. As I said, we did a game back, and a big Warhammer Ancient Battles big game, but with a bit of imagination is going. But there's something about that Napoleonics. It's maybe I'm getting old, and but it's almost like this is proper wargaming. This is what it's all about. So, and I know you shouldn't use phrases like that because people can take it the wrong way and go, I am not therefore saying that anything else is improper. It's just that sort of thing. This is the stuff where when I started, and you saw the photographs and you see it's going back to the original roots of the hobby, I think, in terms of the big game. But it's fantastic, again, and there's nothing better than getting half a dozen like-minded people round the table, and that whole sort of big battle, different. It's quite interesting. Again, you get the human dynamics come into it. I remember at Ligny there was almost. I'm going to exaggerate slightly. I'm going to say there was almost a fist fight between the Prussians. That's not quite true, but there was one player who has a tendency, if always takes cavalry, and if there's an option, he will always charge. And he sort of threw away. It was even on the French side. He sort of threw away the French cavalry. And the other French commanders were absolutely splitting feathers because he didn't really need to do it. But he wanted to do it, and he was absolutely having his Marshal Ney moment at Waterloo, where he just threw the cavalry, and his fellow French players almost came to blows with him because they were just going, "What the are you doing? Why?" Fantastic moments that you don't get in a one-to-one game.
Yeah, that's we've talked about it on the show before, and that's the friction that that lower level games build into the rule sets that you can't that you actually physically get friction between players in the larger games.
Absolutely, yeah. And that whole thing, we've got a plan, and then somebody else goes off and does something completely. Why are you doing that? That's not what we agreed we were going to do. Which you can't. As you say, in a smaller game, the rules are helping you get there. Sometimes in the bigger game, you're getting that natural friction built in just because people do daft things, and it's fascinating.
It is. It's a real experiment in human nature and human interaction. So, just to finish off this bit, really, what have you kind of felt the changes that we mentioned earlier on a little bit about rules and stuff for playing a larger game as opposed to the smaller, more detailed games that you've played in the past? What are the big changes?
I think it's again, it comes back that use the right tool for the job. So I love sharp practice. I will play sharp practice forever. I think it's a fantastically clever, innovative, challenging set of rules. But I wouldn't use sharp practice to refight Waterloo.
Yeah.
So we've been using the Valour and Fortitude rules that the Perrys put together, and you can download free, which is that's quite nice. And it's a set of rules that they Jervis Johnson wrote for because they do big battles. That's what they do. And we found that really, really good for fighting big battles. It might not have everything you want if you're playing a small game, but for a big battle with all that other friction and the fact that, stuff disappears quite quickly, but you've got lots of it. So therefore, actually, it means that you can crack on, get a big game done in a sensible period of time without getting bogged down in the minutiae. But you're making big decisions. You've got reserves. When do I bring my reserves in? When am I doing this? When am I doing that? Rather than necessarily the minutiae, as I said, of an individual combat. That's much more abstracted. So I think, the big thing for me has been use a set of rules that are relatively straightforward, relatively simple, that players can get their head around quite quickly, but will give you the result you want, and allow you to play a big game with lots of toys on the table, in a reasonably sensible time period. And that's probably one of the recommendations, which is, choose the right set of rules. Because if you try and do something with a skirmish set of rules, going back to the micro armor and a skirmish set of rules, it's not going to be satisfying. So, that's definitely probably my key recommendation. And there's lots of those sort of rule sets out there, and things like Black Powder, and people will like stuff and won't like stuff. But I must admit, we found the Valour and Fortitude set of rules actually works really, really well for a big game. The key thing is making sure that players have enough stuff. But again, that feeds back into the big game. You want to be playing with at least a couple of brigades.
Yeah.
And then, see, we did have one game, probably the ratio of figures to players was probably a little bit out of kilter, i.e. we had too many players for not enough figures. And that was a couple of players maybe had a less than, I think they still enjoyed it and enjoyed the spectacle, enjoyed the social side of it. But from the game perspective, probably didn't have enough to do, so that there is a balance that has to be there. But again, that's about throwing stuff on the table and just finding out. And one of the challenges we've got for Borodino that we're playing is that in many ways we've got a lot, and I think there's a desire for people to do big battles. I genuinely, one of the things I've found, having done Waterloo and talking about others, got lots of people who would like to be involved. And actually, one of the things we're trying to balance is we don't want to have too many players for not enough troops, even in the big battle.
Yeah.
So, but I think there's absolutely a desire for people to play big battles. There's just maybe not had a great opportunity, but like all these things, if get on and do it yourself, get half a dozen friends together, and you can pull something together.
It's an interesting thing as well, that the mindset of people who are used to smaller games is the horror on their face when they lose two figures. And it's like, you've got a couple of core there, mate. Don't worry
Yeah,
about
yeah, absolutely, yes.
it.
It does. It's a mindset change.
Two figures could be 20% of your units on the table in some games, whereas two figures is not even noticed it. Not even
Yeah.
noticed it. And as my friend Ian says, it's always good to clear a bit of space when one of your divisions routes off.
There is that. Yeah, it does definitely play into the megalomaniac in you. I think that is definitely true.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And so is that the next big target then, Leipzig?
Borodino first.
Borodino, sorry, yeah.
Yes, because that gives us, again, that gives us the incentive to paint up lots of Russians. So then we should have a decent. We've got quite a few Prussians done for Waterloo. So we've got a couple of guys really stepped up to the table and delivered. Yeah, shout out to Tom Egan who absolutely delivered on his commitments. And that is sometimes one of the challenges of trying to organise a big game where people are excited and want to get involved and they go, yeah, I'll do that. And then real life gets in the way and suddenly you find that what you thought was being delivered isn't being delivered. You've got a problem. But Tom, bless him, he promised that he was going to deliver the Prussians, and he absolutely delivered the Prussians, which is fantastic. So we've got reasonable, with Matt's stuff, we've got a reasonable Prussian force now, starting to build up on the Russians, got reasonable French, and then we need to start on some of the minor nations as well. So with that looking at Leipzig, so plenty to do. But yeah, Borodino at some point next year, we'll have a Borodino weekend or 1812 campaign weekend. And see where we get to. So one of the early battles, probably Borodino, and then maybe do something, I don't know, trying to cross in Brezina after the retreat and do something along those lines. I've not really thought about it, but so many ideas.
Yeah, and those who don't know Tom Egan, came over from Ireland, didn't he?
He
Lives and
did,
works in
yes,
Ireland. So
yes,
there's
yeah,
dedication.
yeah. But brought him and one of his colleagues. So him and Ralphie came across and joined us, which was fantastic. And again, yeah, that's a decent commitment to jump on an aeroplane with a load of figures and come and join us for a weekend. But they had a great time. It was super to host them, and I know that they're looking forward to coming back again next year to join us for Borodino.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for that, John. We recommend the big game to everyone on this show. So thanks very much for being a convert, and I look forward to seeing you do stuff in the future with it. Right, we'll have a quick break for the audience, and we'll be back in a second with our features section. Right. You lovely people out there won't know this, but me and John have had a bit of a break because we had a technical failure, and we're a couple of hours later. But this to you will seem like seamless podcast professionalism when it was actually a massive fuck up. But here we are, and we're ready to go again. And it's the Yorkshire Gamer quiz that we start off with, and this is going to get anyone into trouble. It's going to be this. So it's 20 quickfire questions, usually a yes or a no, or one or the other. And if you want to have a chat about any of them, John, please feel free to do so. But are you ready to go, mate?
I am indeed, yes.
Excellent. First question, go big or go home?
It's go big, isn't
It's always go big. It's always go big.
it?
Question two. Contrast paints, are they great or are they a gimmick?
uh, um, Somewhere, sorry, I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit. I think they have their place. I think anything that helps people put paint on models is good. Um, Are they a little bit of Emperor's New Clothes? Yes, a little bit. Have I got some? Yes, I have. Have I replaced all my traditional paints with contrast? No. So I think they've got a place. And to be fair, I come back to the point that, and especially for a beginner, contrast helps get decent looking stuff on the table. Which, let's face it, if you're going big or going home, the more toys you can get on the table, the faster you can do that, the better. So yeah, I give them a thumbs up.
Lovely. Of course, on this show, the only place good for them is in the bin. Uh, but yeah, yes. Don't forget, kids, that you can put water in your existing paint.
Yeah, but it hasn't got that special sauce, has it? You need a special.
No, no,
That's what it's all about.
special
Everything's
£3
special.
99 per bottle sauce.
Yeah, they are expensive, which is probably one of the reasons why I've only got a small number of them. But anyway, there we go.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, so moving on to paintbrushes. And do you go all posh and Harrogate with Winsor and Newton, or do you go all Yorkshire, true Yorkshire with Pro Art?
I go Yorkshire, but I go Rosemary.
Okay,
Rosemary
yep,
and Co. Series 33 saber brushes, really good value. I think they're better than Pro Art, if I'm allowed to say that. Um,
it'll
but
cost you, but yeah.
I did buy some Winsor and Newton Series 7, take out a small mortgage to get three paintbrushes many years ago, and I didn't get on with them. I found them not great. So, yeah, Rosemary 33, Series 33 is my recommendation. If you've
Right,
not tried them, try them. They're really good.
lovely. Remind me off air to have a chat with you about
Okay.
that. So, question four. 96 figures, is that an army or a unit of pine?
um, It's an art. Well, it is. It's depends what you're playing, doesn't it? Really,
Come on then.
it's an army. I'm gonna have to go there. I think yes, it would be lovely. Have I got a 96 figure pipe block? No, I haven't. Yeah, I think it's a very very small army.
You've got a bloody comfortable fence up there in Harrogate, mate, that you sat on.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've seen recently an advertisement for a new set of rules for World War One, and it's mass battle, and it's 100 figures on a 6x4 table, and that's not mass battle by any stretch of the imagination.
No, no,
Lovely if that's your bag, no problems
yeah,
at all. But
yeah,
one
no,
thing,
yeah,
it's a pipe
I
block and a
get it.
command stand.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get that. I get that.
So, question five: 6x4 table, big game or small?
Small.
Small.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say I'm going to sit on the fence again and say average, but no, realistically, yeah, it's a small table. It's certainly not a big table.
Yeah, and
So
to be fair, average was my original answer, um, which I said most people have access to a 6x4 table at a club.
yeah,
Um, I'd say, well, some people haven't got the room and do smaller. Some people have got bigger, but I would say 6x4 is an average war games table that I would expect to play on.
yeah, it is. And again, it comes back down to what we were saying before: commercial. If you're doing a set of rules, then you if you design it to play on a 6x4 because that's what the vast majority of your
Yeah.
potential customers would have. But it's good to see. There are other things available though. You don't have to stick to the 6x4.
Oh, exactly. So question six. Would you go for a points-based army or an historical order of battle?
Historical order of battle.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, now, I can't remember if you mentioned this earlier on. I think you did. Question 7: mixing paints, wet palette or an old bit of MDF?
Wet palette. Not just because I find it quite useful. I used to use an old white ceramic tile that you'd
Classic.
fill up and then wash all the paint off. I've started using this wet palette. It helps the paint stay damp on the palette, but I'm not into wet blending and all that stuff. We talked about that before. So, but yeah, I don't. A whole bit of MDF I'd find would just soak up the liquid too quickly. The paint would dry out for me. But anyway,
Top tip: put less paint on the MDF.
yeah,
There's your top
yeah,
tip.
yeah. Okay,
Because
fair enough.
I was Big Lee did a video on wet palettes, and one of the big things, it saves you a load of paint. Well, I used some copper paint that I bought when my son was 1. He's now 25. So I'm suggesting that I don't really need to save any paint because it's lasting me 25 years at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of my paints I've had for a long time.
Yeah,
The biggest frustration is I buy GW paints sometimes because they're easy to get hold of. Is just the design of the pots means that they always dry out with half the paint
yeah,
left in them, which really annoys me. So, but yeah, and often I must admit I'm often quite lazy because I use quite a lot. I use the foundry paints with the little flip
yeah.
tops. I will often just take paint straight out of the flip top and stick it on the figure. I know you're not supposed to do that, but it speeds it up and all the rest of it. But obviously, if you're using Vallejo with the little squeezer bottles, then you've got to put it on something. So um,
Yeah,
I
I have
use
to
a wet
say,
palette.
yeah, with the flip top lids, I've got a few GW paints that I use, mostly metallics, and I do exactly the same.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
cut out the middleman.
Absolutely. And to be fair, yeah, the GW paints are good. The metallics are excellent. Big fan of their metallics,
Mm.
and they're easy to get hold of, etc., etc. But yeah, I wish they design a proper bottle for them. But anyway,
As a shareholder in GW, I will suggest that
yeah. Well,
my
I'm
si-
sure
my
there's. I'm
single share
sure.
my single
I'm,
share will definitely get my voice heard.
I'm sure the inbuilt obsolescence of the conspiracy theory that actually they're quite happy for your paint to dry up because then they can sell you some more. But I'm
Oh,
sure
there's
that's
a
vicious
conspiracy
rumor.
theory. Oh, I like that. I like that. Right. So, question 8: undercoating figures, black or white?
Black. I have
Black.
occasionally used actually one of the what again comes back to, I guess, to big battles and painting lots of stuff. I have used coloured undercoats. So, for example, I did for my Sudan British. I undercoat them with a Halford's khaki spray because that's effectively all the uniforms, and then you're washing and highlighting from that. Um, I've sometimes done it if there's use a coloured undercoat, which helps. I did the same with my some of my American Civil War Confederates in grey, actually undercoated them
Yeah.
in grey. Because then you're then just fiddling around doing bits and pieces. So sometimes I'll use a coloured undercoat just to speed things up, but generally it's a black undercoat.
Yeah. Speaking to VK von Ketteringham, a big YouTuber, he uses silver when he's doing a lot of Italian war stuff. If he's painting something
Okay,
with a lot of armour, he'll go for
yeah,
a silver undercoat, which is an interesting one.
it is. Yeah.
You're having a cup of hot beverage, John. Are you going for Yorkshire tea or dirty mucky coffee?
Yorkshire tea every time.
Oh, good man, good man. I thought you were going to let me down there with some posh
No,
coffee, but no.
I'm not a great coffee drinker. Uh, so tea is definitely my choice, my beverage of choice, and yes, definitely Yorkshire tea is the best tea.
Excellent, excellent. Question 10. War games units, if it's historically appropriate, do you like them tightly packed, or socially distanced?
Good question. Tightly packed, albeit I don't actually probably pack them as tightly as I should do. Um, just because it's sort of, there is a balance between I'm trying to cut down and paint as little as I be as efficient as I possibly can. So yeah, my Napoleonics are, most of them are based on sort of four figures on a 40 mil base. The frontage are two figures. They probably should be a bit tighter than that, but it sort of works. So in an ideal world, absolutely tightly packed. But yeah, one of the things I didn't like is, and I've stopped doing it now, and I used to do Sabo bases for things like sharp practice, where so you'd have individually mounted figures on pennies and then on
Yeah.
Sabos, and actually it never looked right because the figures were just too far apart. They do need to be reasonably close to their compatriots to look like certainly from an 18th century battle.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting journey of the individually based figures were like the thing. And I recently did a tribute to Charlie Wesencraft, and in his book from the 1970s, he was talking about multi-basing figures and how it was the new thing. And then it's kind of flipped round to things like sharp practice, where you're taking single figure casualty removals, bringing the Sabo bases back in, and then people like me tearing their hair out when they see it. But
Yeah, I've come full circle
yeah,
in terms of I was always a multi baser. It just made more sense. Then I started to go with the Sabo bases rules. I was playing some of those where you've got figure removal, and
mm,
actually I found it's a pain in the backside. It's a load more work to do the Sabo bases. The figures never stay on the blinking Sabos. They always fall off. They don't. It doesn't look right, and actually you don't need to do it. And so I've actually, most of my sharp practice games now will be using infamy and all those sort of games, the Lardy games, which do have single figure, they're skirmish
mm,
games, they do have single figure removal. I use multi bases and I just track casualties with markers or dice or whatever. And yeah, there's something about, and you can do nice little diorama bases and get the figures
yeah.
looking like a unit. One of the things I've really liked about what Midgard, which James Morris had done, was that 120 mil by 60 mil
Mm.
base, where it's a little diorama. It's really nice, and that's your unit, and that's your frontage, and actually it doesn't matter how many figures you put on it, but you can make it look nice. So I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, definitely multi base is the way to go.
Excellent. And the revolution has started here, kids. You heard it. Sabo bases are over. They're so yesterday.
Absolutely.
As of episode 80 of the Yorkshire Gamer podcast, Sabo bases are no longer in vogue, which is what we like to see. So, question 11. Would you go for a 2 hour club game or a weekend monster game?
Oh, weekend monster game. Yeah, if I had a choice, of course, absolutely. A 2 hour club game is better than no gaming at all, of course. But
Yep.
yeah, if you're going for what do I really want to do, then yeah, we want to do big game and a weekend, and yeah, spend as much time as possible. Yes, definitely a big weekender.
Now, we've got an interesting question here. It is um, avocado. Is it just posh, mushy peas?
I don't know why anybody eats avocado. I don't think I've
Oh,
ever
good
eaten
man.
avocado. I
Good
have no
man.
intention of eating avocado. Mushy peas, nice. Yeah, any. There is definitely an avocado line, and I'm well north of the avocado line. So no avocados for me. I don't care whether it's posh or not. It's not for me. Thank you.
Oh. Do you have a recommended fish and chip shop within your local area?
Weatherby Whaler.
Weatherby
Weatherby Whaler,
Whaler.
highly recommended, really good. I wanted obviously Weatherby. They've got brand. There's one in York near us as well.
Mm.
They do super fish and chips. We're quite lucky. Our local pub does fish and chips on a Thursday night, and they're pretty
Oh.
good.
Ooh.
And just the ability just to nip down and you can either eat in or take away on a Thursday night. That's really good. But yeah, fish and chips, Weatherby Whaler is my recommendation.
Awesome. I used to go to, I don't know if it's still there. I used to go to a place called Jenny's on Skipton Road, just going out of Harrogate.
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
going out towards Menworth on that road.
yes.
Very, very good. I don't know if it's still there, but yeah, that was a good fish and chip shop. So, question 13. This was a universal question until Mark Strachan destroyed it a couple of episodes ago. But round dice, are they allowed on your table? Yes or no?
No, no, no,
No.
no. I don't even know why you're still asking that question. I mean, that's just nonsense, absolute nonsense.
Well,
Yeah.
well, Mark let us down last episode. I go all the way. I go all the way to New Zealand, and he says that round dice are all right.
Yeah, that's just bonkers, absolutely ridiculous. Why would you want
Exactly.
round dice?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it just proves that when they were filming Lord of the Rings down there, the Dark Lord Sauron overtook the country with his round dice.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and you're pushing boundaries, going any dice with more than six faces. To be honest, in my book,
Oh, oh,
so
oh, oh.
a dice should have six sides, no more, no less. End of story. But there we go.
Oh, brilliant. Question 14. War games measurements. Do you like your rules in glorious imperial inches and feet, or do you go for French money and have some centimetres?
It's got to be imperial, and I don't know what it is.
Oh,
And I've thought about this for often. There is something wrong about centimeters, and I think it's not, but I think there's something where an inch is a good measure. Yes, a good measurement. And
yeah.
if you're slightly under, slightly over, it doesn't make a difference. But if you're measuring in centimeters, if you're slightly off, suddenly you've increased by 20% or whatever. It's and yeah, and I think there's something about rules that measure in centimeters where everything else in that rule set is really super precise, and they're just indicative of a rule set that's not very fun to play. Obviously, a
Awesome.
massive generalisation there, but nothing that's
That's
never
what the
stopped
show
us before.
dines out on, John. Massive generalisations. I've made a
Absolutely,
career
yeah.
out of it.
Proper
So
proper imperial measurements. Absolutely, yes.
awesome, awesome. So 15. Do you like a good table in a set of rules, or or you prefer the dice to do the work?
I'm not adverse to a table, but I think they are a bit. I'm going to say old school now. I think there are. I think anything that if you've got you've got to come away from the table, and the table as in the war games table, not the
Yeah.
table, and put your head in a rules or a quick reference sheet or something like that. It sort of breaks the immersion a little bit for me. So I think anything whereby you can manage the mechanics effectively in your head, I think is really positive. So not adverse to a table. Sometimes they are. You've got to have a table in there, but I think my view is get away from tables as much as you possibly can, and use the dice and use the dice and mechanics to help keep that immersion in the game.
Cool. Nice answer. Question 16. 28 mil is king, yes or no?
It is, isn't it? It
It
is.
is.
It's a proper scale. Even I flirt occasionally with the idea of doing something like sharp practice in 40 mil,
Oh,
um,
nice.
which I think would be really. And there was that superb games that I can't remember the guy's name. Unfortunately, again, he's passed away.
Ian
That was
Smith.
Ian Smith. That's right. It's
Yeah.
some of the games that he put on at Partisan in 40 mil. Big games in all sense of the phrase. But yeah, I'd love 40 mil, but again, I've not quite got round to it. There's some good reasons. I've never, 15 mil, 6 mil. They've all got the place. They've all got
Hmm.
benefits. But ultimately, you cannot beat a well laid out table with ranks of 28 mil figures on it. That is, to me, that's the
Hmm.
pinnacle. That's what I aspire to every time. So yeah, 28 mil, I'm afraid, is still king.
I do occasionally, when I've seen them, make the mistake with 40 mil of thinking the 28, so then realise I'm just stood a little bit further away from the table. And then,
Yeah.
and then I move closer and go, oh yeah, they're bigger. But
Yeah,
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 certainly with Ian's tables, and they were absolutely magnificent. But I had to really go close to make sure they were 40s and not 28s because there were so many of them. And it was,
yeah.
they
And
were an amazing spectacle.
the weird thing is, though, again, I'm going slightly off topic, isn't it? But the ground scale's not massively different. Buildings are bigger, obviously, but in terms of you're probably basing a 40 mil figure on a 20 or 25 mil base. It's not that much different from what
Yeah,
you put 28 mils on. So I think you can play 40 mil game on a reasonably sized table. Actually, it would look really good. It's just probably your buildings you need to downscale, but that's a common problem
yeah,
even with 28s, isn't it? So, yeah, so that's one of the lists I've never quite got around to doing it, but that's on the project list for when I have some time is to do a small sharp practice game in the peninsula in 40 mil. That would be really nice.
excellent. Question 17: unpainted miniatures allowed on the table? Yes or no?
No,
No.
yeah, and that
Excellent.
sounded like I'm being pretty. I wouldn't do it. I don't. There's an argument saying, don't be a gatekeeper, but at the end of the day, part of for me, and again, this is personal, isn't it? It's what I say. It, a large part of the hobby is the aesthetics, and part of the aesthetics is painting stuff and getting stuff on the table, and therefore, just put painted stuff on the table. And it doesn't, as I said before, it doesn't have to be a wonderful paint job. It can be pretty basic. Once it's on the table with a nice bit of basing, it's there. But so no unpainted stuff certainly on my table.
Excellent. Now, I don't know whether you're a football man or not, John, but the question here is Bradford City or Leeds United?
It's got to be Leeds United, I'm afraid.
Oh, dirty Leeds! Oh, John, you've let me down. Have you got? Is this from your youth or?
No, and to be fair, I'm not a big football fan. So, but it's always it's my local team. I guess you could say York City, but I'm not sure they play football actually. So let's not go there. But yeah, Leeds is the local club. So if I'm supporting anybody, it's Leeds United, and we've I was going to say we. I'm not really a big supporter, but they've had lots of years in the doldrums, haven't they? So
Yeah,
it's nice to see them getting back into top flight football. So thumbs up for Leeds.
excellent. I haven't got my camera working, so you can't see my Bradford City shirt that I'm wearing. But that's usually like the bit of pressure that I put on my guests when I ask that question. So, question 19, and I think this one is an easy one for you, and that's Yorkshire or the other place over the hill.
Well, yeah, you don't even need to ask that. It's Yorkshire.
Yeah,
I mean, why would you go anywhere else? I can't
exactly.
understand. It's ridiculous. Yeah, certainly not over the hill. Crikey, they've got some strange people over there.
Yeah, I always think that when we voted for Brexit, that the people in Yorkshire thought it was independence for Yorkshire, and that's why it was so popular.
You're right. Absolutely. Yes.
Free pork pies and mushy peas for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. But no,
You
I'm very very lucky to live here. It's a great place to live, Yorkshire, and so definitely Yorkshire.
excellent, excellent. And the final question, a little bit of controversy at the end. Games Workshop, are they the work of the devil? Yes or no?
Oh, that's a good question. Is it? They've. I'm sort of fence sitting again a little bit. Are they the work of the devil? To a certain degree, yes. The insistence that it's the Games Workshop hobby, and not the wider wargaming hobby. But it does it gets people in. They do some good stuff. I've got lots of I say lots. I've got quite a few Games Workshop figures. I like and things like Warhammer Age of Battles we touched on before, which were fundamentally that was Games Workshop. That was the halcyon days where Games Workshop produced some of the best historical stuff in the market, and I think actually, a lot of what we see now in terms of quality of rule books and supplements and things like that is probably, Games Workshop were at the front of that. And fundamentally, I think it's changed now, isn't it? Because a lot of the guys have left to retire, the Jervis Johnsons and the Perrys and Rick Priestley and people like that. But fundamentally, they were historical gamers before Games Workshop existed, and I know it's different now. You've got new people coming in, but so I think overall on the balance things, I think Games Workshop is good for the hobby. I do, albeit that we all have our favourite Games Workshop hates.
Excellent. Well, a very respectable 72.5% there. That would get you a decent grade.
That's not bad. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, sort of. Okay, I'll take that. Thank you.
That's very, very reasonable. You go on the leaderboard for the Yorkshire. I need to do a leaderboard, don't I, with all the stuff on. I might get around to doing one of those. So there's a couple more bits to the features section, and the first one is War Games Room 101, and this is where I get my guests to have a think about something that in the hobby that maybe drives them a little bit nuts, and whether it's a personal thing or a wider thing, I don't really mind. And it's just for them to get me to consign to War Games Room 101 and make them feel better that thing that's been nagging them for years and years and years has gone away and is locked in a vault somewhere. So it's like free therapy, really, is what this section is.
Yeah.
So have you considered, conjugated and deliberated and come up with an answer, John?
I have, yes, and I've given this a lot of thought, and there was several things sort of floating around there, and I did consider rules lawyers because let's face it, we don't need rules lawyers, and I did consider rivet counters as well because we all know that. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not correct. Especially in that, I had it's. I'm just going to go off the tangent. I will come back, but yeah, I did my recent Russians. And they've got, like the British, they've got the unit flag standard, and then they've got the national standard. And I couldn't find which one's on the left and which one's on the right, and I couldn't bloody find it. And so anyway, I took a guess, and then I was put a picture on Blue Sky or somebody, and within about a nanosecond, somebody very kindly told me that yes, I'd made a guess, but I'd got it the wrong way round. So I did look at it and go, do I try and take those flags off and try? And I went, oh, fuck it, no, I'm not. I'm just they're wrong, and I'm just going to have to leave it. But that's not where I've ended up. And actually, I've ended up with Sabo bases. I think Sabo bases are absolutely the work of the devil. If you're going to play this set of rules with single figure casualty removal and basing, we'll just embrace it and go with single figure and just accept the fact that it's going to take you half an hour to move your troops, or do what every sensible person does and go for multiple bases. Sabo bases are the work. They, as I said before, they're rubbish. They look rubbish. Figures never stay on them. They fall over. When you take the figures off, you're left with Sabo bases with holes in it, which looks even worse. Yeah. So no, Sabo bases, take those MDF Sabo bases and stick them in the bin.
I had a feeling that might be coming after our initial conversation. And one thing that really drives me nuts as well with Sabo bases, I'm not a fan, as regular listeners will know, is that it effectively doubles the height of your base. So you've got a figure on a MDF plinth that is then stuck on another MDF plinth, which kind of, your 28mm figures are like 40mm just purely because you've got this huge doorstop underneath it.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think I'd like to think people are starting to to move away from them. We've had, I've had several conversations with other people around that, but yeah, I think they seemed like a really good idea at the time, and
Yeah,
gives you the best of both worlds. But like a lot of things where it gives you the best of both worlds, actually it doesn't. It just gives you the worst of both worlds. So
yeah.
embrace
Yeah.
the multiple basing.
I have said many times on this podcast that if you put pike armed figures on Sabo bases, they would die very quickly because there's a ginormous horse shaped hole in between each of the figures where the advantage of
Absolutely.
the pikes suddenly becomes
Yes.
useless.
Yes. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that, John. That's a good one. I like that one. It's one that's been hanging around for a while, but nobody's actually stuck it in. So
Well, there we go.
that's a good one. So we're going to finish off this little section with Desert Island War Game, and very similar to Desert Island Discs on Radio 4. You get to go to a desert island on your own, and you take the works of Shakespeare. I think you take the Bible as well, all right, or your chosen holy book. But on this desert island, you can take a desert island war game, and it can be absolutely any game that you want for any reason, but it's your ultimate game that you would take with you.
I tried to give it a bit of thought, but on the basis of I can have something that anything I like, which therefore is possibly unrealistic in reality. I would go. I'd want Leipzig, and
A
I'd
full
want
Leipzig.
Leipzig. A full Leipzig on a 1-to-1 battalion level. Absolutely, the whole thing. I mean, it's going to film most of the desert island, but if I'm stuck on a desert island, I've got plenty of time, and I would have great fun with this huge setup with Leipzig and thousands of figures. I think that would be worth spending being marooned on a desert island for if I could take that with me.
Oh, that's fantastic! And I've just thought now when we were in Cork recently, we went over for a week break, and we went to this lovely place that did breakfasts, and it had like 15 different sizes of breakfasts, and they were all named after mafia people. You get like the full, you can have like
Okay.
the Corleone or whatever. And I've just thought that if I could start a historical based cafe and have different levels of breakfast, with the biggest breakfast being the full Leipzig, I think
That's a great idea. I think that would
I
go down a treat.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And you can have a like a Sabo based breakfast, which would just be
Yeah.
like an egg
Right.
on
Yeah.
a
And
piece of
just put it
bread.
straight in the bin.
And you'd have to
Yeah.
cut
No, that's
a hole in the middle of the bread out to put the egg as well. So
that's
you
that's
get
a great idea. I like
even
that.
less food. So
I
yeah,
like
coming
the
soon.
idea.
Coming the full Leipzig.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
So suggestions in the comments for breakfasts and the hierarchy of breakfasts based on wargaming. I think that would be quite good. Uh, so you get to take the works of Shakespeare, which you may or may not use for toilet paper, and a book. What would be a book that you would take that has kind of influenced you over the years?
That's a really good question, this actually, and I'm not sure I've really come down on either side. I think obviously something probably like possibly either one of David Chandler's
Oh,
big
monsters!
books on
Yeah,
Napoleon. I've bought one recently that was recommended to me, and I've yet to get into it, and it's going to take quite a bit of time. But something, or a series of Chandler's History of Napoleon, or something like that, which is
mm.
there's lots in there, or something daft like the whole Lord of the Rings or something like that, where spend some time doing it. But I think probably come down on Chandler and Napoleon, but campaigns of Napoleon or something like that.
Yeah,
Go nicely
absolutely.
with Leipzig as well, wouldn't it?
It would, and it's a good. It's certainly give you plenty of time to read it until you're rescued.
Yes,
It's one of those big ones. And
yes.
finally, John, a war games unit that you would like to take. It could be one that has a significant meaning to you, that's your own, or it could be one that you just want to steal off somebody else that's really good.
Oh, That's a really good question, actually. And I'm not again. I'm not sure. I think if I was going to take a war game unit, I'm sure it's one of these things that I'll think later on this afternoon. I'll go, oh, you know what, I should have said this because I've got. But if I was going to take one on my own, it would probably be something like, I don't know, one of my units of ancient Romans that I did, simply because it was my first foray into proper big battle historical stuff, and I was really pleased with the way they came out. So that just for the nostalgia factor, I think, around that. Having said that, I'm sure there are some. I've seen some beautiful stuff that other people have done and gone, yeah, I'd really like to steal that, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head at the moment. So I'm not proud enough. I'm not afraid of stealing somebody else's good work. So if you've got some nicely painted stuff, go and check on it, because I might have been in there and stolen it.
Well, my Bradford City Pike block is definitely one of its own, so you won't be able to steal that because everyone will recognise it.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely.
That's brilliant, John. Well, thank you very much for that. That's a great features section, and we'll have another short break for the audience now, and we'll be back soon. Lovely. We've had a great chat with John over the last few hours, and I hope you've managed to get quite a bit of painting done while we've been chuntering away. And the end of the show, we're going to talk about a number of things, but mostly about John's works with participation games and how he puts them together, what's a good participation game. A lot of stuff that I do is demo game. It's very, very different. But I think the best place to start really would be Lardy games. How did you get involved in the Lard scene?
How did I get involved in the Lard scene? Good question. It was one of my previous partner in crime, Gavin, and I started playing Sharp Practice because we both like the idea of that sort of, everybody's read. I'm sure all your listeners have read Sharp, and again, it's one of those seminal things. It was written to be a war game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that sort of small Napoleonic heroes and villains in the peninsula and elsewhere was really good. And we started playing that, and not many people were doing it. And I think we decided that actually it would make a good fun game, and that's where it started. But we said, actually, been to lots of shows, and demonstration games are good, and they're nice, and it's really good to see what people do and get ideas and all the rest of it. But I like putting on games and playing games. So actually, when we started doing a couple of shows, we said we want to do participation games, and we want to let people come along and have a play. And I think I hope this doesn't sound too pretentious, but I think a lot of participation games have historically, it shows, been a bit of second-class games where the quality of visual quality has maybe come slightly second to the fact that you're playing a game. And one of the things that we were keen to do is try and put on a game that would look like a demonstration game, but actually let people play it. And that, so we started doing that with the Sharp Practice, and that just got us into meeting various people and various other people in the Lardy community, and got talking to them, and it just grew organically to a certain degree. And then I'd been to a couple of Lardy days? I think I probably had, and put a couple of games on, because they're a great way of meeting people and playing games, and decided, actually, purely for selfish reasons, on the basis of, rather than travelling everywhere to go to a Lardy day, I thought, wouldn't it be good to have a Lardy day in my back garden, effectively? So I remember sat there and going, well, what do you need for a Lardy? You need a venue. Well, I had our local club had got a function room that I could use. and it didn't cost me anything, so that was great. So that means I can start off with doing that with very, very little financial risk. You need a pub. Well, we've got the pub in the village, and you need a curry. And at the time, the pub, it's changed hands now, but John, the landlord, he did a range of very good curries. So it was a case of, well, I've got everything, all the ingredients of a Lardy day on my doorstep. Let's try and do it. And that's what I did. And then that sort of got me into the wider Lardy community, and it's gone on from there. But I think the whole Lardy community is incredibly welcoming. There's lots of opportunities, lots of people that just are keen to play games, want to play narrative games, and are there for the fun of playing games rather than competitions or anything else like that. So I found it a really, really fun, engaging community. And that's really where that started from. So yeah, I think the whole participation game thing got me connected into the Lardies, and the fact that most of the games that we've done have been Lardy sets of rules because I quite like them. And then I found actually there was a little bit of a sort of a public service element because, as I said before, people often, it's less so now, but certainly sort of, nearly 10 years ago when we started doing this, people were still sort of going, I bought this, but I don't really get it, I don't understand it. And then as soon as we played through a couple of turns with people, they would go, I get it, and got off and quite happily started to play Lardy games themselves, which is great. So there was quite can be a bit, I think one of the things that the Lardy community sometimes maybe gets a little bit criticism for is we can be a little bit evangelical, if that makes sense. I really like Lardy games. I think and therefore I will often, these are really good. You need to try these. You need to do this. And sometimes people take that as knocking other sets of rules, which is not the case. But it's just saying, look, there's some really, we enjoy this. I enjoy this. I think you might enjoy this, and if I can help you to get into it, there we go. So that's where that came from.
Yeah, so that was, I think you said there about 10 years ago that you started those, and I'm guessing just from my own memory that was kind of at the beginning of the Lardy Day thing, if you like, because at the moment there seems to be definitely one a month, if not even more frequent around the country.
Yeah. So that's definitely the case. I mean, certainly, that was when we first started doing the participation games. I think the first Lardy game, first e-ball Lard that I held was probably about. I can't remember. Where are we now? We have the fifth one, but obviously you've got that blip in COVID, which. Yeah, that's 5 years ago now. It doesn't seem like that, does it? But that's a different story. So I think we had it a couple of years before COVID. So probably 2018, I think, is probably the first Lardy Day that I ran. And there was some well established ones. I think A Deacon with Operation Market Lard and OML was the first one ever, and then Derek, bless him, up in Scotland with Edinburgh with deep fried lard, I think was very close second to that. But apart from it's a couple of down south, but there wasn't really one locally, so it was quite nice to sort of capture the Yorkshire region, take the Lardy franchise into Yorkshire, and I'm very pleased to have. I think eBall's got itself pretty well established as one of the core established Lardy Games days, but they're a great format. The fact that you can turn up, you play two games. Often, I'm always amazed at the quality of the games that you find at Lardy Games days. They are without doubt as good as pretty much any demonstration game you'd see at a show. The quality of figures and terrain and everything else is superb. By the very nature, they do tend to be stuck to a 6x4. I mean, one of the things that I do with Ebor is I pretty much insist that if you're going to put a game on, it's got to be a 6x4 because I've only got a certain amount of space in the hall, and I need to get 9 games in there. And when Joe Bilton, bless him, famous for big games. When Joe's put on a couple of games for me the last couple of years, which is great that he's willing to travel up and I always disappoint him because he would dearly like to put an 18 foot by 6 foot table and run a game at Ebor, and I just go, sorry, Joe, you can have a 6x4. And I can see the pain in his eyes when he has to limit himself to a 6x4 table. But we do have have now started to do a little bit of an after party. So on the Sunday we ran a couple of games, and Joe managed to put on a 12 foot by 6 foot big chain of command game. So he was happy with that. He was able to, which was great fun, and actually one of my, I'm going to go off topic again, aren't I? One of my great gaming memories of this year was effectively the Kelly's Heroes moment. So if you all remember the famous bit in Kelly's Heroes where they're facing down the tiger, and the tiger can't turn its turret because of the buildings.
Classic.
We had exactly that scenario with two panthers in a French village, and I'd managed to get an armoured car behind them. The Panzer commander then panicked, realised he literally couldn't turn the turrets because you had the houses and the two Panthers next to each other. They couldn't, so decided to drive one into a courtyard to give himself some space. Well, he clipped the corner of the building, so it's a case of, well, you've got to roll to see whether you bring the building down. And of course, he brought the building down on himself. So that was the first Panther out, which that's great. And then the second one managed to rotate its turret, at which point my armoured car disappeared off, and Shimmer Firefly came up to the front of the Panther and took it out. And it was just hilarious. But you could just imagine these two Panther commanders just shouting at each other, and the panic of their crews as they've got this little armoured car behind them, which actually probably couldn't have done any damage. But again, it's that sort of player psychology where the player panicked and went, oh my God, I need to do something about this. Well, actually, he should have just ignored it and concentrated on his job. But it was brilliant, fantastic moment. So we do limit ourselves to 6x4 tables. But no, it's great fun.
And for those who aren't local, Ebor, what does that mean for the non-Yorkshire people?
Yes, well, Ebor on the basis of we're just outside York, and Ebor Arkham, the old Roman name for York. And originally, I did try and be a little bit too clever, so it was like E''Bor, i.e. a bit like E by gum, Yorkshire, and Ebor as in York. But that just ended. Most people sort of didn't get it, and it was a little bit too convoluted and a little bit I was trying too hard. So in the end, it was just easy just to go, let's call it just Ebor Lard, as in, Roman York. And that's where we came from.
Brilliant. Yeah, because there's an Ebor racing festival, isn't there?
Yes, that's right. Yes, at York. Yes. Yeah. So it's connected to York, and so it was nice to have that connection, and it's sort of stuck now. So yeah, couldn't change it if I wanted to.
But the games that you do put on, we'll talk about them in more detail shortly. But you don't just take them to Lardy days; you take them to wider wargaming shows, if you like. I've seen you at Partisan. I think you were at Fiasco not that long ago. So is there a different mindset from your point of view when you're doing a Lardy day to an open public day? Obviously, people who go to Lardy days can go to open public shows as well.
Yes. I think a little bit yes, because I think if you're putting a game on a Lardy day, then you've got 4 players that are going to turn up to play your game. And you can focus entirely on those 4 players, and it's all about giving them the game and all the rest of it. So your focus is entirely on the game and your 4 players. If you're putting a game on at a show, then you might have those 4 players who've turned up to play a game, but you can't just focus inwards on those 4 players and the table. You've got to be very aware of the fact that you are a show, and while it's a participation game, it's also a demonstration game, and I think you've got a responsibility to engage with the wider public. Now that brings challenges, because if you're trying to run a game and talk to the public, that can be one of the things I've found is that I've been very very lucky to have a very supportive group of friends who are quite happy to come along and help me run a game, or do the hostess with the mostess bit, and talk to people walking by, and tell them what we're doing and engage and all the rest of it. So, and that's not something you need to worry about when you're doing a Lardy Day. So in many ways, doing a game at a Lardy Day is much easier. You have got more challenges doing something at a show, but you've got that opportunity to. It's nice to put together a nice looking table with nice figures and show them off a little bit. That's great. But I really enjoy the bit talking to people about what we've done, and maybe some of the design choices and something like that. The funny thing is you'll spend countless hours putting this game together. And then the one thing that people pick on is something you threw together. It took you 2 minutes and stuck on the table, and they go, "Oh, that's really good." Yeah. No, don't look at that. Look at this. I spent hours doing this, but no. It's about this little thing here. But that's just the way it is. But it's great. I've been to shows for many years, and it's nice to be part of it. And at the end of the day, shows wouldn't exist without people putting on games. And I think increasingly, as the sort of retail element of shows becomes maybe less important, because it used to be that you would, as going back to what I said right earlier on, many years ago, going to Northern Militaire to buy some Essex miniatures, that was the best way of doing stuff. But now with the internet and all that, it's you can literally order something and it'll be delivered tomorrow or the next day. So it's nice to be able to see some stuff at shows, but it's not nearly as important. And often, websites and with pictures, you know exactly what you're going to get. So I think increasingly the quality of the games at shows is really important. And I'd like to see more shows do more participation. I think, the thing that the Hammerhead show that's at Newark in February, which is all participation games, I think is that's a great thing to do. And actually, that I think that show benefits from it, because that's often I saw this at Fiasco. If it's a smaller show, once people come, it's really busy for a couple of hours in the morning. Gets to lunchtime, people have bought what they wanted to buy and seen the games that are there and disappear off, and by about 2 o'clock it's dead. The nice thing about Hammerhead is that show is busy till closing time, because people are there to play games. And that's sort of, I guess that's very much more the American sort of model, isn't it? To have you go to a show to play, and I think that's what we like to. And I guess that similar thing with the Lardy days, isn't it? It's less of a public event, but people are signing up to come and play games for a whole day. Or I've not quite got around to doing it as a weekend yet, but it's starting to get there. But some of the things that you can do where you can go and play games for a weekend, that's really good. It is different. It is a slightly different mindset. You do need more help at a show for that very reason, that you need to be engaging with Joe Public, etc., etc. But equally, you're getting the opportunity and introducing stuff to people who might not have even seen it. I've had lots of people who've never played a Lardy game, never played Chain of Command or Sharp Practice. They've come along, they've had a couple of turns, or even often people get so engaged that they stay. I was lucky to be involved with some of the Lardy guys at the We Have Ways Fest.
Oh yes, yeah.
Last year, unfortunately, it clashed with Ebor this year, so I couldn't go. But putting on it's an interesting participation game, not at a war game show. But I remember there was one bit where a young lad joined in. And basically, he was there. He had a list of talks that he wanted to go to, and he just basically wrote them all off because he was having so much fun playing Chain of Command. He said
brilliant.
and you go, actually, that was brilliant, really good.
Oh, fantastic! Absolutely brilliant. So we're just kind of gonna dip into your mind, really, about how you get one of these games from your home to actively being used at Lardy days and shows. So what's kind of the spark, or what do you think about when you decide, right, I'm going to do? I think it was Tet Offensive, wasn't it? Fiasco.
Yes.
What's kind of that? That's it. That's what I'm going to do.
That's a really good question. there will be a germ of an idea that comes out. So I guess if you're looking at Vietnam, so that started on the basis of I fell in love with the Empress Vietnam range, and then that got me into thinking, well, I'll buy some of those, paint some of those up. Let's use chain of command. Well, if I'm doing that, actually, that'd be quite nice to run at a Lardy day, and then came up. One of the things I quite like to do, if it's all possible, is try and set something in with the historical background as much as possible. So the first game I did on Tet was very much based on. At that time, I didn't have the urban terrain, but reading about it, it was I can't remember the units now, but effectively the fact that in the early part of the Tet offensive, effectively the Marines were having to drive up Highway 1 to get into Tet and literally fight their way through. And I suddenly thought, okay, that'll make an interesting game. And there was one of the chain of command scenarios which sort of had the same feel, where you had to get some troops off the end of the table. So it was quite nice to be able to just take that scenario and then put it in and then based it up on, and then did a bit of reading around that and basing it on the units and the leaders and things like that. And the fact that I think for some reason the Americans, because the Marines had just recently moved up there, there was a shortage of staff sergeants, senior leaders, so it could reflect that a little bit in the way we played in the chain of command. And so it's very much an organic sort of process that develops around. I did a Vietnam game, which again was, I think it was, wanted to take it out, wanted to use a bit of jungle and try some of the jungle rules, but again, one of the scenarios is about an objective and sort of felt like, well, let's have a bridge there. And you had a special forces team on the bridge but then the VC were attacking and the American reinforcements coming on. We had a couple of fantastic games of that with the game. So it is very much sort of and I guess I've done enough games now to have a sort of fairly good feel for balance. Sometimes I'll play around with points, but most often than not, I get a feel for feels about right. And often, luckily, it works out that way. So it's a very organic process, but there'll be an idea of something that comes from somewhere, and then I'll start to build into that and take it on from that. But I think that's one of the beauties of things like Sharp Practice and Chain of Command, which I've played a lot of, is that they're very much story driven, narratively driven games. So that ability to build that narrative in and have a story and people getting engaged in that works really, really well.
When you're thinking about this, are you thinking about whether you're going to have player versus players, or whether you're going to have one side run by the umpire and the players kind of collaborating to an end objective?
Again, another good question. I've always tended to do it player v player.
Yeah.
Because I think players often do stuff that you don't think about, which can be a challenge sometimes. But I like that rather that I have thought about. Okay, could we? There is something interesting about that, and that goes back to the old. One of the games that I'm keen to do something to do at a future point is the old Peter Gilder Pony Wars rules,
classic.
which is a classic. And as you said, all the players are playing the US cavalry, and then the Native Americans, are effectively run off tables, and that's a rule set with plenty of tables. There's a good table in Pony Wars. But again, I've seen that for the Sudan, and I'm super keen to try Sands and Sudan. I think is the rule set that again was based on what Peter Gilder did, where all the players are playing the British, and then the Mahdists are effectively not run by the Emperor, but a sort of a non-player character. And again, that's something I'd really like to do. But generally, I tend to find that actually you can set a game up that's players against players. And when I did my Sharp Practice Sudan variant, one of the things I was really keen to do was to make playing the Mahdists interesting and have enough choices that as a player it wasn't just a case of I'm just getting bashed up by the British rifle fire.
Yeah.
And that's where using some of the mechanisms from Infamy, which gave the Mardis the fervour and stuff like that. And as a Mardis player, it was all about timing. When do you deploy your stuff on the table? When do you start to move against the British? And how quickly and how lucky can you be? And can you get through the dead ground of the rifle fire and make contact? And can the British be lucky enough to get enough rounds of shooting that they will, as the Mardis are coming forward, they're slowing down as they're starting to take shock, and their fervour's falling away, and then eventually when they'll break, those sort of waves coming forward to the beach, and can they push them back? And I was really pleased again that was an intriguing, fun game for the Mardis, which is often one of the problems with colonial wargaming, which is it's great playing the British but it's sometimes not as much fun playing the natives. So really keen to make sure that it's fun, engaging, and there are difficult choices, because I think that's what a good game is. One way you've got choices to make, you've got decisions to make, and often difficult. The more difficult you make those decisions, and the more challenging the game is, and the more fun it is to play, because you're putting the players in the foot of. Again, one of the things I like about Chain of Command is it makes you make decisions, and sometimes there are no good choices. There's just the best bad choice type of situation, which is engaging and fun.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got this idea together. You kind of got the bare bones of it. How much time, if any, you might just go, fuck it, I'm going to put it on the table. How much time do you spend preparing, play testing, seeing whether it works?
So the answer I should say is it's extensively play tested, Ken. I spend weeks play testing, and the honest answer is often I don't. I'll throw it on the table, and it's like. And that comes back to that sort of having a almost instinctive or subconscious feel for the balance. Ideally, I'd like, I'll try and run a play test game to see whether there's any obvious, anything obvious that I've missed, but again, one of the things, talking about Lardy rule sets, one of the things like, sharp practice and chain of command is, it's incredibly difficult to balance, because actually so much is dependent on the mechanics and sharp practice. It's the draw of the cards. When do your big men come out and be activated? And you can. That's one of the things I like. You can set up the same game with the same table with the same forces and have two completely different games, because things have gone differently. So often, it just gives you a feel. So a bit of play testing, ideally, yes. Sometimes I have been known where I've been up against it. It's gone on the table, and I don't think my players have been able to spot that maybe it's not been play tested. It's one of the advantages of doing it on Lardy. They're doing two games, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. I'd always suggest to people, actually, if there's a game you really want to play it in the afternoon, certainly if it's my game, because I'll have ironed out any of the problems. I'll remember the rules, and playing it in the morning, and B, I'll have ironed out any issues that we had in the morning. So the afternoon games are always much better. So there we go. There's a peek behind the curtain.
Do you think there's an element of having done it quite a bit before and having a reasonable idea of what's going to work?
Yeah.
That helps.
Absolutely. That comes down to just having a feel for, played lots and lots of games. Not necessarily that particular scenario you might be doing, but having that feel for how things will play out, what works, what doesn't work. That's where it comes from, definitely. I think, if you've never put a game on a Lardy game and want to do it, and I'd welcome anybody. I think you have great fun running a game as well, because you can often have more fun than the players, because you're engaged all the time with both sides, and you're telling a story. That's one of the things about these sort of rules. You're telling a story on the tabletop, and it's great fun to see that unfold as the umpire. But if you've not done one before, then play test it, have a few games, don't just throw something on the table where you've never played before. There's nothing worse than going along to a Lardy day and then playing a game where actually the game runner doesn't really know what they're doing. That's not the way to do it. That's not fair on anybody. So have a go, but do play test it. But if you're familiar with the rules, you've probably got a fairly good idea of and a fairly good feel for what's happening. And again, at the end of the day, these things don't need to be balanced. It's one of the things. War games. You can make the argument war games shouldn't be balanced. And one of the things I like about it, it's about telling a story. And actually, you might find you're up against it right from the get-go. And I've had several games where, games have swung wildly. And I really like that, where we played, it was one of the, Jono, who goes to the Leeds club. He ran first time he put a chain of command game on an e-board. First time he'd ever run one. And so quite rightly said, right, I want to have a play test. So he came up to the Harrogate club and ran a play test game for us. And I was lucky enough to play in that. And that was a fantastic game that swung sort of a third of the way through. We were British, we were attacking. We got one section being completely hammered. We were absolutely on the back foot. And I thought if this is a campaign game, I'd be going, right, we're retreating, we're pulling, we're not doing anything here, but we stuck at it. And then we managed to flip it round. We managed to get a run of phases together. We managed to put an attack in down the right hand side, and we ended up winning the game. And just that the way the story unfolded and swung round, and both sides went, that was a brilliant game, because the Axis forces, the Italians and Germans, thought they had it in the bag, and then all of a sudden they didn't. And equally, the Allies thought they were up against it, and all of a sudden you put two or three things together, it works. You go, oh, brilliant. So that sort of narrative. And so often, if you are on the losing side, you can have as good a game, if not a better game, than winning. It's about telling that story.
Definitely agree with that. We've had some of the games, or the games that stick in my mind are always those ones that have that narrative feel to it. And I've mentioned it before, but we had a cracking game, a desert game, where the Brits needed to capture an objective. It was touch and go all the way through, and we got down to the last working British tank. And the Italian artillery piece on the objective ran out of ammunition. So all the tank had to do was run over it, and it broke down 100 meters from the objective. So it was just absolute classic, that sort of stuff. And to have rules that have those sorts of possibilities involved make it, as you said earlier on, no two games are exactly the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned it briefly when we were talking at the start of this section about how important presentation is for a demonstration game, and I kind of agree with you in that for many years they were. I'm not saying that they were a poor relation, but people put less work into the table than they did into the mechanics of the game. So it was quite often a very good game, but not necessarily a spectacle. Whereas nowadays, quite often, you will find it's hard to tell unless you read the blurb whether it's a demo game or a participation game. So it's a big thing for you, I know. What kind of lengths do you go to make sure that the quality of the game and the presentation is spot on?
I think it's looking at the whole package, and it's a case of nicely painted troops, good terrain, nice player aids and things like that, and just trying to make every part of the game as good as possible. I think one of the things that probably I've always been a figure painter and always enjoyed painting figures, and quite happy to put decently painted figures on the table. I think one of the areas that often gets on a bit underlooked. Is that the right word? I don't think it is, but overlooked is the terrain. And I'm started. I've changed my view. Actually, it's really interesting that certainly at shows, often it's the terrain that people see first. And if you've got an engaging game with nice terrain, then certainly this is why I'll think, oh, that looks like a wonder. I'll walk over and have a look, and then you'll see the figures, and the figures are nicely painted and all the rest of it. But actually, the thing that grabs you is the terrain. And I think as a hobby, we're getting much better at putting good quality terrain on tables, and you just you've seen some of the stuff that people do, which is absolutely Al Sherwood with the stuff that Al's done, and obviously Joe Bilton, who we mentioned before, who's made himself a name for big tables, but it really impressive looking terrain that brings you into it. And I think the days of just putting a felt cloth on the table and throwing a few buildings on I think luckily we've moved past that now. So terrain is increasingly part of I think the important ingredients going to making a good game look good, and making because it's the environment at the end of the day. Why do engagements happen? The engagements happen because of the environment, because there is a reason for people to fight over a bit of land, be that a road junction, river crossing, whatever it is. But actually, that conflict actually starts from the terrain, and it's nice to see terrain reflecting that. And it's an area I want to do more and continue to improve my terrain. The only downside of that is that terrain in 28mm takes up a lot of space. But that's the way these things go. But I'll always try and I want a good looking table, and then everything else goes on top of that.
And you mentioned player aids, probably more important for a regular show compared to a Lardy day. But do you produce game specific handouts or player aids or tokens or whatever for the stuff that you put on?
Yeah, I try to. Again, it's trying to make things easy for the players, and so cards, for example, if it's card driven or things like. So I did a Chain of Command, big Chain of Command Western Desert game at one of the Lardy days a year or so ago, and rather than give it, one of the things you can do with Chain of Command is you've obviously got your core platoon, and then you can add extra assets in there, and rather than having those predetermined for the players, which is perfectly acceptable, I effectively said, right, you've got 30 points or whatever it was, I can't remember, but then made some little cards up with each of those. So actually, rather than just looking at a list, they had some cards that then they could select those cards, and then they had them on the table as those extra elements and things like that. I did it with with Vietnam, with us to some of the sneaky tricks that the VC can use. So I made a set of cards that, because you can play that card, you can only play it once, but you've got it in your hand, you can see what it does. And you can play that, and the physical act of playing that card actually, rather than pulling something off a list, there's something about it. So, and these days, with laptops and printing and all the rest of it, it's not difficult to do. So just a little bit of time and effort on handouts or things like that, just to let people engage. What I don't do is, if I'm running a game, is I don't give the players the rules. I don't give players a quick reference sheet, because what I want them to be doing is playing the game, not playing the rules.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm there to. Whether it's a Lardy day and if you're playing a Lardy day, most people they'll be familiar and know the rules anyway. But for me, is I want people to be thinking about the decisions. If you're playing Chain of Command, you're the platoon commander. Well, you need to be thinking about, what are the decisions I need to make as a platoon commander with this situation, rather than trying to work out a set of rules. So you tell me what you want to do, and then I'll help you put that into the way the rules work. And that I think is something that helps from a again, when you're playing a participation game where you haven't people aren't familiar with the rules, don't try and teach them rules, but get them to put themselves in that position. Whether it's you're playing Richard Sharp or whoever it is, and in Peninsula, and you've got to try and capture some gold, or whether you're playing a platoon commander in Normandy, you want to be trying to get the people into that mindset and thinking about, well, what do I need to do, and then take things forward from there.
Excellent. So one of the things that we've not covered really is this, and I don't know whether this will be a difficult one to cover or not, but the sort of person who runs a participation game to me is quite interesting. Steel Lard, I think I remember you were a couple of tables down from me, and there's always a sense of fun coming from the tables that you were running. So is there a sense of showman that's required? Is there a sense of like an outgoing personality that's needed to put these games on? I think you're not going to be a person who shies away from social interaction, shall we say?
No, to a certain degree, I think that's right, because you're putting yourself out there to a certain degree. Again, I think it's a bit easier, I guess, at something like a Lardy Day, which again you've just got to interact with four people. And to be fair, that's no different to if you're playing a game at the club or with your mates or something else like that. So I think enthusiasm's is a big part of it. You want to be enthusiastic about the game. You're putting on a game because you enjoy it, and therefore take that sense of fun and enthusiasm and try and present that out to the players. And then if you've got a nice set of rules and a good scenario, then as we talked about, those sort of fun moments will just arrive, and you don't necessarily have to create them. You're just facilitating that. I think at a show, you need to be a little bit more outgoing and that ability to engage with people. One of the things that certainly do when we're putting games on at shows is to deliberately try and go out of our way just to speak to people who are looking at the table, and just say hi, how you doing? How any questions or that sort of just engage people. And some people don't particularly want to talk to you, and that's fine. I wouldn't necessarily want to talk to me either. But there's nothing. And it's a bit of a trope, but it is true. There's nothing worse than going to a show and you're presented with a bunch of guys who clearly know each other, but with their backs to the audience, playing a game and not interacting. You can do that. You can do that at the club, and you can do that at home. So if you're taking it out, but make an effort to engage with the public and talk about it. And I'm very lucky. Some of the guys that help me are very, very sociable and very outgoing and great characters, and they do a much better job of that than I do. So but it is important. But I think I would certainly go. You don't need to be an extrovert or fantastic showmanship to put a game on at a Lardy Day. You want the fact that you want to do it. You've got an interesting game, you've got an interesting story, and you want to share that and have fun, then go ahead and do it. Absolutely.
Do you have a kind of a stock of games that you can take to places that you kind of rotate round, or is it you have a game for a year and then recycle it and do something new?
Probably the latter. So, because I'll come up with an idea of doing a game, and then quite a lot of time and effort goes into, quite a lot of blood and treasure goes into putting that game together. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to keep dragging out the same old game week after week, Lardy show after Lardy show, show after show, because people have seen it. I think you can do that for maybe a little bit less of an issue at a Lardy Day if it's different Lardy Days and different people. I do like trying almost have a change it once a year or do something different. And that doesn't mean you can't go back to it. I did an 1812 sharp practice retreat from Moscow game, snow table, ragged French, Russian Cossacks. I think I put that on at the first steel lard back in whenever that was. And it's not been on the table for some time. At some point, actually, that would be nice to resurrect that and get it back on the table, because it'll be at least 5 years, if not longer, since it was actually brought out. So keen to do that. So yeah, do cycle games round, definitely. But I like to think, right, I'm going to put a game together, and I'm not. The Vietnam thing is I think with the game that I put on at Fiasco, I want to take that to Partisan. Hopefully, if I can get in Partisan this year and run that at Partisan, because I think it's a super looking game and not many people will have seen it. So I'll do a couple of shows with that. But the Lardy, the downside of that is it's incredibly. There's an awful lot of boxes. There's an awful lot of stuff. So it's practically. So I've got Hearts of Lard, Joe Bilton's Lardy Day down in just outside London early next year, and I won't take that Vietnam game because I can't. With four of us going down with overnight bags, and there's no way I can get that and all the terrain I need for that game. So I need to do something else. Sometimes there is a practical consideration of going, actually, I need a game that I can fit in a certain number of boxes to go in the boot of the car, so to make sure that everybody else can actually fit in. So I've got an idea for what I'm going to do at Hearts of Lard. So we'll see how that pans out. But so I think to try and answer the question rather than rambling again is I'll try and get some decent amount of mileage out of a game, but don't flog the backside of it. When people sort of go, oh yeah, I've seen that before, and walk on, then you've probably overdone it. Give it a rest and then come back to it a few years later.
Excellent. And have you got anything in the pipeline that you can share with us for future games? Any ideas that are bubbling under?
Yeah. So what am I thinking of? What am I thinking of doing? I've got whether I get around to it this year or not, I don't know. But I've got half started my Chain of Command Spanish Civil War game. Again, that was just driven because I really like the figures that Empress do for the Spanish Civil War. It's an interesting period as well. So that's something I want to put on, and the fact that actually I've got lots of peninsular buildings from Napoleonics that actually can be brought forward to 1930s Spain reasonably easily. So that ability to have terrain that you can use in multiple periods, I think, is also very helpful. So that's the game I want to do. I think I need to work it through, and this probably is a game that I do need to play test. But my probably for Hearts of Lard is to do sharp practice, but based on the attack on Le Hay Saint at Waterloo. So not doing the whole of Waterloo, but just the very specific where the 54th and 55th French infantry were trying to attack the farmhouse, but I'm also probably trying to bring some of the Sharp's Waterloo into it. So I've got half an idea that the Prince of Orange will be on there, and actually if the Prince of Orange is wounded or killed, then actually that's a bonus to the Allies. So the fact that if Sharp decides that he might take a pot shot at the Prince of Orange, as per the book / TV, so things like that. That's my sort of idea. I'm playing around with that at the moment, and have some of the. I've not fully formed it out, but yeah, have the Prince of Orange there, maybe making some fairly poor decisions on the Allies side. So actually, him being wounded could be a positive for the Allies rather than a negative. And French cuirassiers and all that sort of stuff. So I think that could look quite good. It'd be quite a big sharp practice game, and I have had some conversations with A. Deacon about. He's been playing around with some ideas for his Texas War of Independence for a big sharp practice game, or a sharp practice game, a mix of sharp practice and Chain of Command that we've been playing around with. So that's at the back of our mind to maybe see where we get to on that. So always lots of ideas, too many ideas, not enough time. But yes, I'm hopefully I've got till March to sort that out. I think Hearts of Lardy is in March. Certainly, I know Joe's advertising for people to. I put games on, but also to go and play. So if anybody's listening, fans likes the idea of my slightly bonkers LaHaye Saint and wants to play it, then get yourself signed up for Joe's Hearts of Lard, and maybe you'll have the opportunity to play on it. We'll see if I can get it together.
That's brilliant. And kind of just to sum up then, John, on this bit that we've been doing, if you're somebody listening to this who maybe hasn't done a participation game before and fancies doing it, what would kind of John's top tips be for doing that? I'm sure we'll have spoken about most of them during the conversation, but just as a summary at the end of this little section.
So I think you want to do something that you enjoy. It's a game, coming back to that it's a game that you enjoy playing and go, actually, I'd like to take this to a wide audience. I want to tell people this is a really good game. And the best way of doing that is actually put a game on and invite people to come and play. And that ability, just we often say, shows is, look, come in, you can play the whole game, you can play a couple of turns, or what. It's entirely up to you. You can dip in, dip out of it. That's entirely that's important. Having that flexibility to do that. Nicely presented table, nicely presented troops. They don't need to be Golden Demon standard, but you want something that looks cohesive. And I think I've mentioned Joe a lot recently. I think one of the things that Joe built and does incredibly well is he puts together a table that looks cohesive. And his use of color palette, and he's fascinating to talk to, actually. I don't know whether you've had, but his ideas on terrain and color are really interesting to listen to. But something that looks cohesive, it's got a story behind it. You want something that if you're putting something on at a show, you probably want something that's eye catching and it's a bit different. Trying to think, I've done a couple of modern games, obviously with Vietnam and helicopters or anything with a bit of height on it it catches people's eyes. So when I did the What a Cowboy modern version, What a Cartel with the Special Forces raid on some cartel jungle hideout, having a couple of Black Hawk or a little bird and a Black Hawk helicopter sat on the table immediately drew people in. And, oh, that's interesting. What's going on there? So something like that. AC. I've seen it before. People have done it with maybe the Sudan, but ACW with a balloon on the table. Yes. People just go, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's different. So think something like that, or something just eye catching, or but just don't be shy. Grab people. One of the things I do find is actually often it's quite difficult, surprisingly, to get people to play a participation game at a show. Often, certainly early doors, and I get it because people are there. They want to have a look round. They don't. At 10:30, they've just walked in the door. They don't necessarily want to go and sit at one table and start playing a game. Some people do, and that's wonderful when people do. But often people go, "Oh, no, it's all right. I'll come back later. I want to have a look round." So again, having a group of you, so you can actually start playing a game with your helpers, and then once a game, it's amazing. Once a game starts playing, it's like a gravity field. People then start coming in, and then that's when you can go, well, yeah, I tell you what, and those your team can drop out and the players can drop in. But getting a game going, it's fascinating how that tends to, because there's a buzz about playing a game and people are enjoying it, and people naturally go, oh, that's it. What's going on over there? I'll go and have a look. And that's often when you get a bit of a crowd around the table because you're playing a game and engaged with everybody, and there's a bit of a buzz going on. And Rich Clark does that wonderfully well at the participation games he's puts on at shows. But yeah, Rich is a larger than life character in all sorts of ways, and a definite showman. But there is an element of, but you don't need to be that much, but just having an engaging game and where people are enjoying themselves, people will naturally be attracted to it, and then just grab them, let them roll some dice, even just look, even it's a case of, just grab some, roll those dice and get them involved in the game that way. It's amazing how people will do that. And then people will drop out, and that's absolutely fine. But it's really engaging where people, will often stay and play the whole game. And you go, somebody's given up an hour and a half of their show day to come and play your game, that's really encouraging. That's really nice.
Is there a kind of a magic time length, do you think, for participation?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question, because in an ideal world, we had this discussion right at the start when we started doing games. Is if you read all the stuff or listen to it, says you want a game that's going to be half an hour long, because you want people to dip in, play. They're not there to play all day, and they can disappear off, and that's great. But if you are playing Chain of Command or Sharp Practice or a commercial set of rules, those rules are designed for a 2-hour game, a 2.5-hour game. So the question is, do you then reduce the game down? Do you simplify it? Do you have a Sharp Practice light or a Chain of Command light, which means you can play that game quicker? And we took the decision, and at the end of the day, it's personal choice, and this is not a right or wrong, but it's the decision we made, is to say, no, actually, we're playing this game because we like playing this game. So we recognize the fact this game will probably we'll have a 2-hour game. But what I'm not saying is you've got to come and sit and play my game for 2 hours. If you want to, fabulous, fantastic. Thank you very much. That's awesome. But what I want to do is say, look, play a couple of phases. If it's Sharp Practice, if it's Chain of Command, play a couple of phases. Go through rolling the dice, and we'll walk through what you can do. And once you've played a couple of phases, then you've got an idea of what the game is, and then you can go away and if you're interested, then and you've not played it before, pick it up, etc., etc. Or if it's Sharp Practice, then just play through a few card draws and just see how, get a feel for it and feel for the mechanisms. But so we took the decision to we're going to present it as the rules are written, rather than trying to water them down. And I think that's worked out pretty well. So it certainly worked for us.
Well, it's been a fantastic morning and afternoon talking to you, John. Thank you for putting up with the technical issues that we had earlier on. I hope you've enjoyed the chat and a bit of War Games discussion. At the end of the day, at the end of each show, I always ask my guests if they have a question for me. I'm quite happy to get away with not having one, but I've battered you for over 3 hours with questions. So if you have one, great. If not, we shall call it a day.
I first of all, thank you for inviting me on, Ken. I've had a blast. Nothing better than talking about playing with toy soldiers. So hopefully people have enjoyed listening to me witter on for longer than I'm sure you intended. But thank you for the opportunity. And hopefully I will see people over at some shows and Lardy days, and if people are around, then please do come and say hello. In terms of you, I guess, I mean, you are the advocate and unashamedly flying the flag for the big game. I guess the question is to you to flip it on its head and something like, Sharp Practice, which is a skirmish game. It's a large skirmish game. It's still a skirmish game. Have you played something like that, and would you consider playing something like that?
I certainly would consider playing it, and I think playing it isn't the issue with me. Going back to the Venn diagram of wargaming that we spoke about earlier on, the painter collector side is massive with me compared to the gamer side. So the issue that I have with skirmish games is that I'll paint the figures for it, and then that's it. I'm done. I'm bored. what do I do now? What do we, So with the Italian wars, I can paint pipe blocks forever, and I'll still never have enough. So there's always enthusiasm for the project. Whereas with a skirmish game, because the game itself isn't my end goal, I don't have that drive to finish 20 figures and then play the game and then play the game and then play the game again. And the only time I've really got into a skirmish game, was, I don't know if you remember it, I did a Cops and Robbers 1970s Sweeney
Oh,
setup,
yes, yes,
um,
yes.
with all the streets and everything.
Yeah,
And that grabbed me because I'd done the figures in a week, but I was sourcing cars. I was looking for, old um, Matchbox Vanguard, or can't
yeah,
remember what they
yeah,
are of the right scale,
yeah.
and then building O gauge model railway buildings and all that sort of thing. So that kept me engaged in it, and it's something I'd love to go back to. And I've always thought about using What a Cowboy as What a Geezer.
Yeah, no, that would
Um,
work. That
uh,
would work really well.
so
Yes.
that's something I'll certainly get into. But that's the reason.
Yeah, no,
I,
that's
I I
interesting.
I probably only play, maybe 8, 10 games a year. So
Yeah,
when I do, I mean that's going to change obviously when my work situation changes. But so when I do, I choose to play the games that I prefer, which are the bigger games. But yeah, certainly I'm not opposed to it. It's just that I get bored once I've got all the figures.
no,
And,
that's.
and some things like Napoleonics and Italian wars, you can never have all the figures.
Well, I
You can
think
never have a
that
full Leipzig.
yeah, no, that is. Although I am taking it to my desert island, so but no, you're right, and I think that's one of the interesting things with something like sharp practice, which is that you can end up actually with lots of small collections for the different areas and different nations and all the rest of it. So, but yeah, and I think probably the way I approach it, which is to put on a game and I do everything for that game and then present that game and then sort of move on
Mm.
is quite interesting. But as I said, I'm enjoying getting back to doing some big games and having that doing a bit,
Mm.
having a foot in both camps, I think, which is really good. So no, thank you. That's interesting.
And I'd certainly, I sat down. Alex Southern came up here one day, and we played O Group, and I really
Oh
enjoyed
yeah,
that. So I just think it's a case of got opportunities and of to try it out, and me not doing all the hard work for a change.
yeah, no, that's always it's always nice when somebody else sometimes puts a game on. It's as I said before, I love hosting, I love putting games on, but it's nice sometimes when somebody else goes, I've done this, and you get to play and you go, oh, I really enjoyed that. So yeah,
Well, it's just time to say goodnight to the audience.
well, good night, audience. But thank you very much, and again, thanks for the opportunity, Ken. I've had a blast.
Lovely. Thank you very much, John. Good night, everyone. Well, thank you very much, John, for that. That was a great interview there, and some great ideas for putting a participation game on a show if that's something you're thinking of doing. And that enthusiasm, that drive, that knowledge of your chosen period and set of rules are some top tips there from John. So, the next episode, a little bit unsure at the moment. I have done my last day of work. I don't retire until the end of the year, but I have finished working, so to speak, and I'm using up leave, etc. So I'm hoping that's going to make me a bit more regular rather than eating bran flakes. And I've got a lot of episodes that are kind of backed up a little bit. There's the War Games Time Machine one, which we've been waiting for ages. Still an interview to sort out with that. I've got a road trip to the East Coast for a couple of interviews. So, two people there, they know who they are. My apologies, but I will get there soon. Then there's the Brews in the Vineyard Christmas edition, which will definitely be out before Christmas. And finally, the listener phone in, which is definitely going to be in the new year now. But I quite enjoyed doing the last one of those, so I'm going to do one again. And then I will be into booking people in for the new year, and you may have got a little bit of a clue on who some of those guests are going to be from the interviews that I did at Partisan. So, thanks very much for tuning in again. If you don't already, please subscribe, leave a message, leave a review. They really do help to get people to see this podcast and try it out for themselves. Tell your friends, give it a go. It's free at the end of the day. So, that's everything from me. So, until next time, see you.